Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they are in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
Beyond the 60 apprehended or detained and many deported since.
Welcome back to Normal Island Live.
Oops.
Of that article, quote, "In the last decade, Jonathan Pollard, the American Navy employee who spied for Israel in the mid-1980s and is now serving a life sentence, has become a cause célèbre in Israel and among Jewish groups in the United States. The Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, a consortium of 55 groups, has publicly called for Pollard's release, arguing, in essence, that his crimes did not amount to high treason because Israel was then and remains a close ally. Pollard has never denied that he turned over a great deal of classified material to the Israelis, but he maintains that his sole motive was to protect Israeli security. He told United States District Court Judge Aubrey Robinson Jr. in a memorandum submitted before his sentencing in 1986, "I never thought for a second that Israel's gain would necessarily result in America's loss. How could it?" End quote. Hirsch writes that when the Clinton administration tentatively agreed to release Pollard during Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, then CIA Director George Tenet told Clinton that he would resign in protest. Clinton backed off. The intelligence community at large was so outraged by the prospect of Pollard's release that they began leaking sensitive details about the Pollard case, including what secrets he gave away. Going back to the article, quote, "Pollard, these officials told me, had done far more damage to American national security than was ever made known to the public." Many officials said they were convinced that information Pollard sold to the Israelis had ultimately wound up in the hands of the Soviet Union. Supporters are mistaken in believing that Jonathan Pollard caused no significant damage to American national security. Pollard gave the Israelis vast amounts of data dealing with specific American intelligence systems and how they worked, a most sensitive area of intelligence defined as sources and methods. It also hindered the United States' ability to recruit foreign agents. A number of officials strongly suspect that the Israelis repackaged much of Pollard's material and provided it to the Soviet Union in exchange for continued.
Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being retained,
Pollard's material and provided it to the Soviet Union in exchange for continued Soviet permission for Jews to emigrate to Israel. Other officials go further and say there was reason to believe that secret information was exchanged for Jews working in highly sensitive positions in the Soviet Union. A significant percentage of Pollard's documents, including some that describe the techniques the American Navy used to track Soviet submarines.
See, they can't be trusted. Why are you still supporting Israel, America? Seriously, why?
Was of practical importance only to the Soviet Union. End quote. No less an intelligence official than William Casey, the CIA director during the Pollard affair, also reportedly adopted this theory. Back to the article, quote, "William J. Casey, the late CIA director, who was known for his close ties to the Israeli leadership, stunned one of his station chiefs by suddenly complaining about the Israelis breaking the ground rules. He asked if I knew anything about the Pollard case, the station chief recalled, and he said that Casey had added, 'For your information, the Israelis used Pollard to obtain our attack plan against the USSR. All of it. The coordinates, the firing locations, the sequences, and for guess who? The Soviets." End quote. Despite a plea deal, the judge gave Jonathan Pollard life. The full scope of his leaks still aren't known today. Pollard was released from prison
ages before we
in
find out, I
2015
think.
and moved to Israel in 2020. As will become abundantly clear to you all by the end of this video, Israel spies more aggressively against the United States than almost any country, friend or foe, in the entire world. The following is an early CIA history of Israeli espionage from March 1979. Quote, "In 1954, a hidden microphone planted by the Israelis was discovered in the office of the U.S. ambassador in Tel Aviv. In 1956, telephone taps were found connected to 2 telephones in the residence of the U.S. military attaché." End quote. Regarding the methods of spying on officials inside Israel, quote, "Shin Bet personnel are experts at entering private quarters where they go through visitors' luggage and personal papers.
For people who don't know, Shin Bet are the Israeli equivalent of, well, it would be MI5 here in the UK or the FBI or the DIA, the Defence Intelligence Agency, possibly. So, and an attaché is basically military person, military expert that gets put into the embassy across the world, into US embassies. There's probably quite a few attachés in the one down in London for us, and in other countries as well. So neither of these countries can be trusted, obviously.
Special portable camera equipment is used for this purpose, and the results are processed in the Shin Bet laboratory. Shin Bet technicians have concealed radio transmitters in phonograph cases, in the false bottoms of coffee cans, and in the bottoms of portable cooking stoves, which can be used as stoves without removing the communication equipment. End quote.
Unbelievable.
In the Journal of Palestine Studies summer 1998 issue, Duncan L. Clark provided an enlightening audit of, as described by the title, Israel's economic espionage in the United States. Quote, "While other countries conduct economic espionage against the United States, Israel is the only major recipient of U.S. foreign aid to do so. It is just one of the dozen countries identified by the National Counterintelligence Center as active against U.S. interests. Israeli espionage against the United States is also distinctive. No other country is more frequently said to have a unique, special relationship with the United States. And no country receives more reliable political protection from Congress. The United States and Israel agreed in 1951 not to spy on one another, but while there is little evidence that the United States has conducted economic espionage against Israel, the agreement has been flouted repeatedly and flagrantly by Israel. Israel
I doubt that. I'm pretty sure the Americans and possibly the Israel, well, I don't think they need to do much here. They've got 3 major organisations here who actively campaign for them. It's completely sickening, really.
economic espionage has infuriated the U.S. intelligence community." End quote. Clark provides a detailed record of Israel spying, including the Recon Optical case, involving an American firm of that name that produced surveillance equipment. In 1986, security guards caught 3 Israeli Air Force officers stealing 50,000 pages of proprietary information. They had been stealing these materials for a year. Israel was ordered by an arbitration panel to pay Recon Optical $3 million. In the early 80s, the Israelis were found to be stealing classified blueprints of F-16 fighter jets out of the General Dynamics plant at Fort Worth, Texas. After the Reagan administration banned exports of cluster bombs to Israel following their invasion of Lebanon in 1982, U.S. Customs intercepted Israelis plotting to illegally export them to Israel in violation of the order. Later in the decade, Connecticut-based NAPCO Incorporated helped Israelis illegally export secret technology for chrome plating the insides of tank barrels. NAPCO even pled guilty and was fined $750,000. No Israelis were prosecuted. In May 1985, a Richard Smith was charged by a federal grand jury of smuggling 810 Critons to Israel. Uses for Critons include acting as electronic triggers for nuclear weapons. Smith was released on $100,000 bail, but failed to appear for trial. He was later seen in Israel. In 1990, it was reported that an executive of American contractor SAIC illegally transferred missile defense technology to Israel. 1991, Israeli General Rami Dotan was convicted by an Israeli court for conspiring with an executive of General Electric, Herbert Steindler, to illegally divert $40 million of U.S. military assistance. Not the first time this happened, nor the last. As in 1994, a U.S. federal court indicted Steindler again for the same offense. 1993, Israel illegally acquired remotely piloted vehicles technology, allowing the Israeli company Maslot to underbid its American competitors. 1997, according to an FBI affidavit, a civilian employee of the U.S. Army Tank Automotive and Armaments Command, or TACOM, named David Tenenbaum, admitted giving, quote, non-releasable classified information to every Israeli liaison officer assigned to TACOM over the last 10 years. This included classified data on theater missile defense systems, the Bradley fighting vehicle, ceramic armor, and other weapon systems. This takes us up to the date that Clark's article was published, and we will look at more examples, including up to the recent past.
Why would Israelis spy in and on the U.S.? A General Accounting Office investigation referred to Israel as Country A and said, quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Country A conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the U.S. of any U.S. ally.
But first, a February 1996 report from the General Accounting Office for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence titled Economic Espionage, Information on Threat from U.S. Allies. Quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Israel conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the United States of any U.S. ally. Classified military information and sensitive military technologies are high-priority targets for the intelligence agencies of this country. According to a classified 1994 report produced by a U.S. government interagency working group on U.S. critical technology companies, Israel routinely resorts to state-sponsored espionage using covert collection techniques to obtain sensitive U.S. economic information and technology. Agents of Israel collect a variety of classified and proprietary information through observation, elicitation, and theft. End quote. The report features examples of Israeli espionage against the U.S., many of them the same that were reported by Duncan Clark. Bob Drogan and Greg Miller, writing for the Los Angeles Times, provided new information on the topic in 2004 in an article titled, Israel Has Long Spied on U.S., Say Officials. Quote, despite its fervent denials, Israel secretly maintains a large and active intelligence gathering operation in the United States that has long attempted to recruit U.S. officials as spies and to procure classified documents U.S. government.
You can't make this stuff up. It's like a Le Carre novel. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Literally nicking defense technology from their supposed ally who funds them to billions a year. And they've been nicking technology, details of technology, or straight up actually nicking the actual technology itself for their own gain so they can carry on doing their genocide. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Government officials said a former intelligence official who was familiar with the latest FBI probe and who recently left government. There is a huge, aggressive, ongoing set of Israeli activities directed against the United States. Anybody who has worked in counterintelligence in a professional capacity will tell you the Israelis are among the most aggressive and active countries targeting the United States. The FBI has investigated several incidents of suspected intelligence breaches involving Israel since the Pollard case, including a 1997 case in which the National Security Agency bugged 2 Israeli intelligence officials in Washington discussing efforts to obtain a sensitive U.S. diplomatic document. End quote. The article describes the dangers facing U.S. officials stationed in Israel. Quote, U.S. diplomats, military officers, and other officials are routinely warned before going to Israel that local agents are known to slip into homes and hotel rooms of visiting delegations to go through briefcases and to copy computer files. End quote. Another case, a more contemporary example, names a familiar face to those who watch the channel. Quote, the latest counterintelligence investigation began more than 2 years ago and initially focused on whether officials from a powerful Washington lobbying group, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, passed classified information to Israel. End quote. In 2012, the Associated Press plunged headfirst into the uncomfortable conversation with an attention-grabbing headline. Former U.S. officials say CIA considers Israel to be Mideast's biggest spy threat. The article describes some of the risks associated with being a spy or a diplomat in the Jewish state. Quote, the CIA station chief opened the locked box containing the sensitive equipment he used from his home in Tel Aviv to communicate with CIA headquarters, only to find that someone had tampered with it. He sent word to his superiors about the break-in. The incident might have been dismissed as just another cloak and dagger incident in the world of international espionage, except that the same thing had happened to the previous station chief. In a separate episode, according to another 2 former U.S. officials speaking to the Associated Press, a CIA officer in Israel came home to find the food in the refrigerator had been rearranged. In all the cases, the U.S. government believes Israel's security services were responsible. End quote. In light of these shocking reports, quote,
that one got me the first time I watched this video. Why would they go into someone's fridge? That's a bit weird. The agents are going to have to explain that one to me. I really don't get it.
U.S. national security officials consider Israel to be, at times, a frustrating ally and a genuine counterintelligence threat. The CIA considers Israel its #1 counterintelligence threat in the agency's Near East division, the group that oversees spying across the Middle East, according to current and former officials. Counterintelligence is the art of protecting national secrets from spies. This means the CIA believes that U.S. national secrets are safer from other Middle Eastern governments than from Israel. End quote. Contrary to the claim that Israel's interests are America's interests, as evidenced by the subsequent quote from Joseph Whipple, a former senior CIA clandestine officer and head of the agency's Office of Congressional Affairs, who told AP, quote, they have their interests, we have our interests. For the U.S., it's a balancing act. During the Bush administration, the CIA ranked some of the world's intelligence agencies in order of their willingness to help in the U.S.-led fight against terrorism. Israel fell below Libya, which recently had agreed to abandon its nuclear weapons program. End quote. A significant development came in the form of a Newsweek article in May of 2014 by their national security correspondent Jeff Stein. Quote, Israel's espionage activities in America are unrivaled and unseemly, counter-spies have told members of the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees, going far beyond activities by other close allies, such as Germany, France, the UK, and Japan. No other country close to the United States continues to cross the line on espionage like the Israelis do, said a former congressional staffer. A former top CIA operative told Newsweek, it was the last place you wanted to go on vacation. I.C. Smith, a former top FBI counterintelligence specialist during the Pollard affair, tells Newsweek, in the early 1980s, dealing with the Israelis was, for those assigned that area, extremely frustrating. The Israelis were supremely confident that they had the clout, especially on the Hill, to basically get away with just about anything. This was the
That's
time of
better.
the criteria country list, later changed to the national security threat list. And I found it incredible that Taiwan and Vietnam, for instance, were on it when neither country had conducted activities that remotely approached the Pollard case, and neither had a history of or a comparable capability to conduct such activities. End quote. This piece elicited outrage from the Israelis, and Newsweek published a follow-up just days later, again written by Jeff Stein, who reported, quote, Israeli Intelligence Affairs Minister Yuval Steinitz, among other top Israeli officials, unequivocally denied the Newsweek report, saying Israel stopped all spying operations in the U.S. after Jonathan Pollard was convicted of spying for Israel in 1987. One anonymous official was quoted in the Israeli media as saying Newsweek's account had the whiff of anti-Semitism in it. End
Oh,
quote.
dear God.
Far from backpedaling, the author provides another bombshell, emphasizing the audacity Israeli officials operate with. Writing about, quote, a surprise visitor to Vice President Al Gore's room in a hotel suite in Jerusalem. A spy in an air duct.
Yes, you heard that correctly. He was in the air duct in Al Gore's bedroom. What the hell? He's shown a clip of Bruce Willis. Oh, that bit in Die Hard. I can't remember if it was the first or second one. I think it was the second one. I think that was the one in the airport with the Mercs. Unbelievable.
According to a senior former U.S. intelligence operative, a Secret Service agent who was enjoying a moment of solitude in Gore's bathroom heard a metallic scraping sound. So the room was all quiet, he was just meditating on his toes, and he hears a noise in the vent, and he sees the vent clips being moved from the inside. And then he sees a guy starting to exit the vent into the room. The operative recalled for Newsweek. Did the agent scramble for his gun? No, the former operative said with a chuckle. He kind of coughed and the guy went back into the vents. To some, the incident stands as an apt metaphor for the behind-closed-doors relations between Israel and America. Frenemies even in the best of times. The brazen air duct caper crossed the line of acceptable behavior between friendly intelligence services, but because it was done by Israel, it was quickly hushed up by U.S. officials. End quote.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Examples continue, and as recently as 2015, Adam Entis reports, for the Wall Street Journal, mind you, Israel spied on Iran nuclear talks with U.S. Quote, the spying operation was part of a broader campaign by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to penetrate the negotiations and then help build a case against the emerging terms of the deal, current and former U.S. officials said. Said a senior U.S. official briefed on the matter, it is one thing for the U.S. and Israel to spy on each other. It is another thing for Israel to steal U.S. secrets and play them back to U.S. legislators to undermine U.S. diplomacy. U.S. officials said Israel has long topped the list of countries that aggressively spy on the U.S., along with China, Russia, and France. The U.S. expends more counterintelligence resources fending off Israeli spy operations than any other close ally, U.S. officials said. End quote. The article earned a rebuke from the Israeli government, which spurred a rebuttal from Glenn Greenwald and Andrew Fishman for The Intercept, titled, Netanyahu's Spying Denials Contradicted by Secret NSA Documents. Quote, Israel's claim is not only incredible on its face, it is also squarely contradicted by top-secret NSA documents, which state that Israel targets the U.S. government for invasive electronic surveillance and does so more aggressively and threateningly than almost any other country in the world. Indeed, so concerted and aggressive are Israeli efforts against the U.S. that some key U.S. government documents, including the top-secret 2013 intelligence budget, list Israel among the U.S.'s most threatening cyber adversaries and as a hostile foreign intelligence service. One top-secret 2008 document features an interview with the NSA's Global Capabilities Manager for Countering Foreign Intelligence. While noting that Russia and China do the most effective spying on the U.S., he says that Israel also targets us. He explains that a national intelligence estimate ranked Israel as the third most aggressive intelligence service against the U.S. While praising the surveillance relationship with Israel as highly valuable, he added, one of NSA's biggest threats is actually from friendly intelligence services like Israel. Netanyahu's denials are entirely false. The Israelis engage in active and aggressive espionage against the U.S., even as the U.S. feeds the Israelis billions of dollars every year in U.S. taxpayer funds. End quote. Finally, a brazen example of overt Israeli spying during the Trump administration, if it can be believed. Indeed, in 2019, Politico reported Israel accused of planting mysterious spy devices near the White House. The shocking nature of the operation is described in detail. Quote, the U.S. government concluded within the last 2 years that Israel was most likely behind the placement of cell phone surveillance devices that were found near the White House and other sensitive locations around Washington, D.C., according to 3 former senior U.S. officials with knowledge on the matter. But unlike most other occasions when flagrant incidents of foreign spying have been discovered on American soil, the Trump administration did not rebuke the Israeli government, and there were no consequences for Israel's behavior. The miniature surveillance devices, colloquially known as stingrays, mimic regular cell towers to fool cell phones into giving them their locations and identity information. Formerly called IMSI catchers, they can also capture the contents of calls and data use. The devices were likely intended to spy on President Donald Trump, one of the former officials said, as well as his top aides and closest associates. Based on a detailed forensic analysis, the FBI and other agencies working on the case felt confident that Israeli agents had planted the devices, according to the former officials, several of whom served in top intelligence and national security posts. It was pretty clear that the Israelis were responsible, said a former senior intelligence official. So even though Trump has formed a warm relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and made numerous policy moves favorable to the Israeli government, such as moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, ripping up the Iran nuclear deal, and heavily targeting Iran with sanctions, Israel became a prime suspect in planting the devices. Daniel Benjamin, a former coordinator of counterterrorism at the State Department, is now director of the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding at Dartmouth. He recalled once meeting with the head of Mossad, the premier Israeli intelligence agency. The first thing the official told Benjamin was
Mossad's basically the Israeli version of our MI6 or the Americans' CIA. Technically, they're not allowed to, those two technically aren't allowed to operate in their home countries, but I'm not too sure about Mossad. Seems they can do whatever the hell they want, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually spying on Israeli citizens as well.
that Israel didn't spy on the U.S. I just told him our conversation was over if he had such a low estimate of my intelligence, Benjamin said.
Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I'm Lewis Aaron, and I hope you're well. Today, we'll be talking about how Israel have been interfering in the International Criminal Court through alleged espionage and threats and stalking and mysterious envelopes of cash. Then we'll talk about how Israel's long-term plan for Gaza through Israel's expansionist plans and IDF soldiers planting flags in Lebanon. Everyone's talking about Hurricane Milton in Florida, but how is capitalism fueling this hurricane? And lastly, the Trades Union Congress, TUC, have said Labour can use its overhaul of workers' rights to win over disaffected Tory voters and Reform voters too, as the government prepares to introduce landmark legislation that will grant new rights to 7 million workers. Now, if we're talking about capitalism and how it's ruining the world, workers' rights and unions, who better?
Turn Left Media on YouTube. This is Lewis Aaron. He is brilliant. He is a TikToker as well, I believe. He is indeed. He's a TikToker. So this is a good follow-on from our previous video.
To join me than Curtis Daly. How are we doing?
Oh, I'm really well. And I love your little call to action at the beginning of the show. It's like, oh, everything's going wrong. We're late. Give us money. It's almost as if you're doing it on purpose. I jest.
No,
this is what happens in an organisation where we're all voluntary. And I really appreciate you finished work at 5:30 when you put a show together. So can't thank you enough for that. But I'm really excited to get into the stories tonight with you, Lewis.
Yeah, me too. I just really need to focus on not making sure absolutely everything is perfect. And ultimately, it probably won't be anyway, because I had to rush the last few graphics. But we'll see how we get.
Lewis, my man, there's no such thing as perfection. Trust me on this. Perfection doesn't exist.
Get on. But we'll start with the first story. So prosecutors in the Netherlands are investigating information and reviewing a request to initiate a criminal case against senior Israeli intelligence officials who are accused of interfering with the International Criminal Court, the ICC. What a shocker. We never saw that one coming. The request was submitted last week by a group of 20 people who are mostly Palestinians, and they're urging the Dutch prosecution service to investigate claims that Israel sought to obstruct the ICC's inquiries into alleged crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories. So the information came from a Guardian investigation that came out months ago, actually, and it exposed how Israeli intelligence over a 9-year period.
Okay, the Guardian headline says, spying, hacking and intimidation. Israel's 9-year war on the ICC exposed. Good for you, the Guardian. At least you're doing something decent for a change.
Allegedly tried to undermine, influence and intimidate the ICC's chief prosecutor's office. So, as the ICC is located in the Netherlands, it is their responsibility under an agreement to protect the safety and security of ICC and its staff, and must ensure it's free from interference of any kind. But let's look at the alleged interference, and it's pretty wild. It reminds me of something out of a spy movie. Israeli intelligence captured communications of numerous ICC officials, including Karim Khan and his predecessor, prosecutor Fatou Bensouda. They intercepted phone calls, messages, emails, and documents, but it gets quite a bit worse. So the surveillance was ongoing in recent months, providing Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with advanced knowledge of the prosecutor's intentions. A recent intercepted communication suggested that Khan wanted to issue the arrest warrants against Israelis, but was under tremendous pressure from the United States. A big shocker. Israel actually deployed its intelligence agency Mossad to surveil, hack, pressure, smear, and allegedly threaten senior ICC staff in an effort to derail the court's inquiries. Of course, as I said before, the USA was also involved in a pressure campaign to stop the current ICC prosecutor from requesting arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. But pressure asserted by the US is not being seen as illegal, but of course, very unethical and just frankly immoral. But this story is focused on the old prosecutor, actually, Fatou Bensouda, who was the prosecutor for the ICC between 2012 and 2021. So on the 16th of January 2015, Bensouda opened a preliminary examination into what the court called the situation in Palestine. Within 2 weeks, 2 men who had managed to obtain the prosecutor's private address actually turned up at her home in The Hague. They did not identify themselves in any way, but said they wanted to deliver a letter from an unknown German woman who wanted to thank her, along with an...
Okay, this is from The Guardian. Sources familiar with the incident said the men declined to identify themselves when they arrived, but said they wanted to hand-deliver a letter to Bensouda on behalf of an unknown German woman who wanted to thank her. The envelope contained hundreds of dollars in cash and a note with an Israeli phone number on it. What the absolute fuck? Oh.
Envelope of cash and an Israeli phone number to ring. Very strange. It was also reported that Yossi Cohen, the former head of Mossad, and just to remind everybody, Mossad is like the CIA of Israel. They secretly met with the prosecutor, in which he tried to pressure her into abandoning the investigations of war crimes and crimes against humanity that Israel has perpetrated against the Palestinians. His actions were actually authorized at the highest level on the basis that the ICC posed a threat to Israel and its security.
Sorry about this, it keeps on pausing itself.
Mission was to either compromise her or enlist her to cooperate. Bensouda did report all of this to ICC officials. But there were multiple interactions with Cohen and Bensouda between them. He would just simply turn up out of nowhere. On one occasion, he reportedly said to her, "You should help us and let us take care of you. You don't want to be getting into things that could compromise your security or that of your family." At one time, he just turned up at her hotel room as well. They spied on her and her family and tried to use recordings to discredit and further threatened her. He even turned up, as I said before, at her hotel room in New York. And at one point, he contacted her on her phone. And when she said, "How did you get my number?" he gave a very creepy reply, to which he said, "Did you forget what I do for a living?" A source said that Cohen had raised questions about her security, her family's security, in a way that led her to believe that he was threatening her. And on another occasion, Cohen apparently showed Bensouda copies of photographs of her husband taken covertly when they were visiting London together. And also, Cohen suggested to the prosecutor that a decision to open a full investigation would be detrimental to her career. Now, after all of these attempts failed, the Israeli government worked with the Trump administration, and the USA actually imposed sanctions on the prosecutor. And the prosecutor was also looking into crimes by Americans in Afghanistan. These sanctions blocked her from traveling to certain places and targeted her assets. And later, when her prosecutor term was up at the ICC, the new prosecutor was being chosen. The US and Israel actually tried to exert all of their influence to make sure a prosecutor who was friendly to them would be chosen, but they failed. Israel also spied on the phone calls of witnesses to Israel's crimes, including multiple human rights organizations that were reporting information to the ICC. These groups were then later declared terrorist organizations, and even multiple European countries and a former head of the CIA said that there was no evidence that they were terrorists. This is why when Israel said they have eliminated a terrorist, we don't believe them, because many of these terrorists that they say are people who work for human rights organizations who Israel just simply don't like. Now, the Dutch prosecutors are still reviewing the information, and hopefully they will turn this into a full investigation. And I just wanted to note at the end of here that Boris Johnson did say last week as well that when he met with Israeli officials, I think it was in 2017, they found a listening device in his room after they left. Curtis, it's like a spy movie. What do you think?
Well, I find it funny that you introduced this as a spy movie, because when I was reading this story, the first thing that came to my head was, this is like a spy movie. Now, there will be many people who aren't surprised about this. I don't think I am, but would say, does this really happen, or does this happen in the movies? It does. And Israel has one of the most comprehensive surveillance networks and systems in the world. Now, people wouldn't, people would obviously believe that Israel spies on its enemies. But you have to understand, it often does the same to its allies. You mentioned Boris Johnson and the recording device in his bedroom. They consistently do it to their allies. And why do they do that? Well, it's from paranoia. But why are they paranoid? That's what happens when you run a fascist apartheid state. You become paranoid. Even though Netanyahu was technically democratically elected, and often people say Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, it's not a democracy when it's an apartheid regime. So given that, oftentimes you want to cling on to power, and you then resort in the most extreme sort of authoritarian tendencies, and surveillance is one of them. Now, I want to commend the prosecutors at the ICC. It's an incredibly tough thing to do. Look, I mean, some of the things you covered there are absolutely insane. These aren't just pressure. These aren't just blackmail. This is threats to their safety, their families. And you can understand why some may fold over that pressure. Put yourself in that position. You're a prosecutor for the ICC, and you potentially could be issuing arrest warrants to Netanyahu and others in government. And someone essentially comes knocking on your door or rings you up and says, I mean, think about your family. It's incredibly...
What, just me in the black screen? Hi, Miss Hire. Hi, darling. Yeah, I can't quite figure out how to get an actual video onto my screen, onto my stream yet. So as long as you can hear it, I can see what if they're showing anything that you need to see. Currently going through Normal Island from Turn Left. So we've got Lewis hosting, and hi, darling, and Curtis Daly, and they're talking about Israel spying on the ICC in The Hague. I can start from the beginning if you like. I can go back. How long have I been watching? I've been watching for just under 10 minutes. I can go back to the beginning. You sure? Okay. Right, let's carry on. They both actually say it, and I completely agree with them. It's like a spy novel. Okay, sweet. How am I looking, actually? I was fiddling with my camera earlier on to see if I can get the balance right. I still look pale as hell, though. Right, here we go. Back to Lewis and Curtis.
Incredibly scary. And even though we know the crimes of Israel, what this demonstrates to the rest of the world is that Israel is a rogue state. It doesn't
well said.
Adhere to international law, as we know. And any, I can't think of the words, when the ICC and the ICJ said, we think this is plausible genocide, what Israel is committing, their response isn't, oh, we need to make sure we look into this. They say, oh no, you're wrong, we're right. The international court, they're corrupt, they're Hamas or whatever it is. And that is exactly what a rogue state would do. I think what is very interesting is potentially there's a new wrinkle here. And there's a shift that maybe a couple of years ago, we wouldn't see other nations stand up to Israel or even investigate them. So I have to say hats off to the Netherlands. Obviously, they're the host for The Hague, who are looking into this because it's incredibly important. What we need to be mindful of is this isn't just going against Israel, it's going against the West. And when we say the West, we mean the US. So since we know that the US are hardly standard bearers of international law, we know they break it all the time. What does this do in practice? I'm not sure, but I do feel like this is a marked shift where we're getting other nations actually standing up to Israel. I think that's fascinating, and I'll be very interested to see what our government, what the Labour government do in response.
Yeah, I think one thing that frustrates me as well is just even moving away from this story is just the history of The Hague, right? That was the location where people were prosecuted after World War II, right? It's where we prosecuted the Nazis and many other people who committed, obviously, some of the most heinous acts against humanity that have ever existed. And, you know, a lot of ancestors of Jewish people who were in concentration camps, who were victims of World War II, their ancestors are living in Israel, and their government are trying to undermine a court whose template was created based off of the court that actually prosecuted the Nazis. And this is the thing that constantly blows my mind, is that part of the international order that was created, you know, part of it was created immediately after World War II, and then little bits have come over the last 70 or 80 years. A lot of it was to prevent things that happened in World War II from happening again. And they're trying to undermine that system. And if anyone can claim the closest relationship to the victimhood of what happened in World War II. It is people who are in the Jewish diaspora. And this is what frustrates me, is that we need to hold up this international order despite all the attacks against it from the US, from Israel and all of its allies. But what also pisses me off,
Well, yeah, in their case, it has been. It doesn't give them justification, though. It really doesn't. They've literally turned into something that was actually punishing them, abusing them. So I don't see them having a legal leg to stand on. The stuff that they are doing are war crimes, and they should be prosecuted for it. They really should.
so much is that instead of just standing back and saying, oh, we're going to cancel some arms licenses and say that we need to, encourage aid to get into Gaza, we should be actively fighting against this state. And I'm not saying war, I mean legally, right? We should be doing everything that we can to pressure that state into ending its apartheid regime, ending the genocide that's happening right now in Gaza, ending what could be escalating into a huge inter-regional war. But we're not. We're standing back, and that's what's just pissing me off. Are we gonna, go to World War III and set up a new system after that? After after more crimes are committed? I don't know, but it's making me more and more depressed every single day.
Well, you mentioned about the legal system, and this is the thing, right? Often changes throughout history is actually dependent on the legality of things. We wish we could say, the genocide stopped because of the moral uproar across nations. Unfortunately, That's not really how it tends to work. The last line of defense, which is our legal system, is what is usually implemented to change systems or to move from an apartheid regime to a so-called democracy. So that is why it is so important that we uphold these international legal systems, because often these are the things in which we manage to pressure nations to do the right thing,
said.
Rather than sort of saying, well, what you're doing is disgusting, because at the end of the day, many people will look at Israel and look at other fascist regimes. It is a fascist regime in the past, and the cry of morality falls on deaf ears. It's only when people are forced to make the correct decision that's when things change. They go kicking and screaming, and often that's through the legal system. So what worries me is Israel getting involved and trying to rig it, where essentially international legal systems are at the behest of foreign power, whether it's Israel or the US, and often that means we won't get the change we need, because those legal systems are the pressure in of itself. So it is really worrying. But again, I think it is a new wrinkle that the Netherlands are getting involved, and other nations are getting involved, because some of the things you brought up is absolutely astonishing. I also want to commend Karim Khan, who is the current prosecutor. He has a hell of a job on his hands, and it seems like he's not going to stand down either. Now, our government, they said they would not stand in the way of ICC arrest warrants. That's what they said. Whether we can trust them or not is another thing. But I do want to see what they're going to do in the face of this. Are they going to join in calls and say, yes, we should investigate Israel, or are they going to stay quiet? That remains to be seen, and it'd be hard to predict, again, because the Labour Party seems to change their position on this all of the time. But yeah, it's the legal system behind it that often fosters change, and the idea that Israel trying to rig it is unsurprising, but incredibly worrying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am going to quickly move on to our next.
Yeah, I wish the UN was not a toothless. Yeah, it is toothless. Get rid of the 5 permanent. Get rid of the 5 permanent. Bring in the entire UN to decide these things, not just have us, the Americans, the Chinese, the Russians, and the French deciding these things. Because if one vetoes or abstains, that's it. It doesn't pass, doesn't go through. That's where I'd start first, getting rid of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Just get rid of that. Nothing will ever get done. Nothing.
Story, just because it's a kind of continuation of the same topic. I like to try and provide multiple stories from different topics, but I will continue on this topic today. But we have some more interesting stories coming up soon. But I couldn't help but talk about this next thing. So the far-right Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has called for Jewish settlements in Gaza this week. So on Monday, on the anniversary of October 7th, he posted on Facebook saying, "We must end this war with the IDF in full control of the Gaza Strip over the long run. In this situation, assuming diplomatic conditions make it possible, it would be possible to renew Jewish settlement in Gaza and ensure a permanent, stable Jewish presence." Obviously, it's important to quickly note that Israel's in a coalition government. He doesn't necessarily speak for the entire government, and I'm not defending other parts of the government, but it is important to know that right now there is an Israeli coalition being held together with a bunch of far-right people saying we're going to dismantle the government and dismantle this coalition if you don't do exactly everything we say. And that's how we've ended up here. It's not the first time.
Yes, it was far too late in both of those instances, especially in Rwanda. Thousands had already died at the point that the UN actually went in, and the UN peacekeepers were basically at fault for Srebrenica. Damn, I can't remember. Was it Swiss troops? Was it Swiss UN peacekeepers that were guarding this bridge and they let them cross? So yeah, the UN has made fuck-ups, major fuck-ups, where thousands of people have died in ethnic cleansing. Sickening, really, sickening. Yeah, they get rid of the 5 permanent, make the Security Council a hell of a bigger. So, yeah.
To get total control over Gaza. So David Cameron, once famously said, and it's the only time I will quote David Cameron, that Gaza was like an open-air prison. But under the plans Smotrich is planning, it seems to be stepping into what could be described as a concentration camp. And I don't use that word lightly at all. They already restrict all journalists from entering Gaza and anyone leaving. No organizations can currently enter unless it's for aid purposes, but now they want to stop all aid. Smotrich has been holding talks with Benjamin Netanyahu to expel all foreign aid organizations out of Gaza and allow the IDF to take over deliveries and distribution of all the aid. This will include a cost of over $5 billion a year to Israel. So as Haaretz, they were reporting on this, they speculate that they believe this is part of a plan to get full control of Gaza and allow no outside influence to affect the occupied territory in any way. So it would allow them and Smotrich to enact punitive punishments on Palestinians in Gaza, just like he's done in the West Bank, where he has withheld taxes collected by Israel that would generate.
It's a good question. Who's actually in this coalition government? Well, obviously, because Netanyahu's the Prime Minister, that's Likud. They're the lead. So there's probably more Likud members than any other party. So let's see who's in this coalition. Okay. Right. Current Israeli government makeup. Okay, Likud, which is Netanyahu's government. Yeah. Okay, Likud. United Torah Judaism. Shas. Wow, that's quite a party name. Religious Zionist Party, Otzma, Yehudit, New Hope, and Noam. It's led by Netanyahu. This is the 6th time he's been PM. Wow. Right. United Torah Judaism. Religious Conservative Political Alliance in Israel. Founded in 92. It's another hereditary religious political party, founded in 84. Oh, he's a Sephardi rabbi. Correct. Yeah. Do you think I really need to look up the Religious Zionist Party? Got a funny feeling they're right wing. I'll look up Otzma though. Otzma Yehudit. Holy far right, ultra nationalist, Kahanist, and anti-Arab political party. Oh dear God, they sound even worse than look. Ah, Christ. That's the party of Ben-Gvir. Bloody hell. Oh, they're the ideological descendants of the Hak Party. So delightful chaps then. New Hope. Centre-right. Neolib. Is really versing of the Tories? Or the One Nationers, probably. And Noam. Far-right, Orthodox, Jewish, religious Zionist political party. Established in 2019. They're only 5 years old. Dear God, it's just a government of far-right nutters. Dear God. Well, yeah, the oldest one that I noticed there out of the ones that are currently in the government is the 80s. So, yeah, fresh. They're young. They're not as old as our parties or the American ones. The DUP is a little bit older than them. Obviously, ALBA was created 2020? Between 2018 and 2019, ALBA was created. I think most decent SNP members were fed up with them and told them to basically piss off. Well, now he's permanently pissed off. I'm doing some research into him. On my next live stream, I'll be doing a sort of, not a deep dive, but a mini dive to explain who this man was and what and how he shaped Scottish and British politics, essentially. My lovely granddad, may his soul rest in peace, hated the man from the beginning. My granddad was a great believer in independence, but he detested Alex Salmond with a passion. Quite like Nicola, though. Oh, thank you, honey. I'm doing well, thank you. Finally got through that stupid work capability assessment. So that's me, I'm all free and clear. I won't be needing to hand in any more, well, they call them Fint notes, a sick line, essentially. So that's it. No more going to my GP and saying I need another one for them. Done. Don't need to do a monthly call with them just to check in to see how my work search is going. Hilarious. So that's all done and dusted. And hopefully I'll be getting an extra £455 a month. Well, it'll be going on his Super Hubby's benefit, but it'll be for me to get me more stuff. What I'm desperately needing is more wrist and ankle braces. Fantastic. Definitely going to be needing it if I'm going to be typing a lot more. Yeah. I love my man John Sweeney. I'm quite glad that he's the leader now and the First Minister. He's a good egg. He's from my neck of the woods in Perthshire. So he's got a good head on his shoulders. Hopefully we'll do better with him. But we'll see. The next Holyrood elections are in 2 years. Should be good. Yes, very good egg. Very good egg. I was reading Keir Starmer basically saying he was sorry for the loss of Alex Salmond, and I just laughed. Oh, I miss her now. I really do. I didn't blame her when it got out of the place. Apparently really bloody toxic in the Commons. I don't know what she's doing now, though. I think SNP got her seat again, I believe. So, good to see that Paisley still don't want any of the unionist parties representing them. Unfortunately, my constituencies went back to Labour. In some ways, I didn't blame them. They were probably fed up with all the scandals and the nonsense going on in the SNP. Back to Lewis. Yeah, totally agree with her. For a while, when I was in my mid-30s to my early 40s, I wanted to become an MP and represent this area. Oh no, don't worry. I'm fine doing this. I am here to educate after all. And I wanted to become an MP, but after reading a lot of stories about all the shadiness and direct assaults and stuff, nope, glad I'm not going to be doing that now.
In the West Bank by Palestinians, effectively starving them of money. He's also used his position to authorize multiple settlements in the West Bank, and he's trying to do exactly the same in Gaza. And just to further demonstrate the general expansionist mindset of many senior Israeli politicians and even its citizens and the IDF, watch this clip.
Oh no, it's just them putting the flag up. Camera's panning around. Looks like it's on the edge of a cliff. Is that a destroyed building? Oh look, there we go. Planting an Israeli flag on probably something that isn't rightfully theirs.
Well, we seem to have lost the sound on the video, which is probably my fault. But that was the IDF soldiers planting a flag in South Lebanon. Why? because many Zionists believe that that land is actually theirs.
No, it
When the
isn't.
World Zionist Organization was negotiating with the Western powers years before Israel declared independence, this section of land where they are right now, planting this flag, along with Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, the Sinai Desert, which is Egyptian territory, Transjordan, which is now Jordanian land, and of course, South Lebanon. They wanted it all. And now many people to this day still want that land. Israel has used this excuse of its right to defend itself since its inception. Then they invade, then they occupy, and then they annex. At one point or another, they have attempted to occupy every piece of land that they originally wanted. Now, Curtis, what are your thoughts?
Well, you first have to know that Smotrich said that he's made it his life's mission to stop a Palestinian state, which is, of course, true of many people in Israel. He is a far-right figure, but I mean, his opinion is, not a minority in Israel. Now, very interesting that you showed that clip of the Israeli flag in Lebanon, and that's exactly what it is. Israel is a settler colonial project which is trying to expand into and to defend us.
Yeah. I'd vote for that absolute wank of a man. Criminal. Times 34, of course. Don't vote for him. Yeah, he would actively encourage them to use nukes. Obviously, they won't do that, because if they use them anywhere there or in the surrounding countries that they say is Israeli territory or part of Israel, they wouldn't be able to live there. And the spread would take out most of Eastern Europe and go into other parts of the Near East. So no, they won't be Go on, advocate for it, you tangerine ball bag. But he will just keep on funneling funds to them so they can basically flatten everything around them, and so they can achieve their greater Israel. Correct, no one's perfect. Yep, the Dems aren't great either. Yeah, the alternative is actively evil. In my opinion, actively evil. Yes. I keep on checking the polls. Obviously, most of them can't be trusted. Lovely Maria was telling me what ones can be trusted a little bit. And I'll be checking towards the end of the month, essentially, to see how they're looking. I think she's still in the lead, I believe. So that's looking good.
Selves, but of course we know that's a load of nonsense. What they're trying to do is take over essentially the entire Middle East. It's going to start with Palestine, then they're going to move into Lebanon, then Yemen, then Syria, and pretty much anywhere, because that is what colonial powers do. Now, right now, of course, the West is pretty much still backing Israel, but we need to understand that this is going to come up and bite us on the ass eventually, because colonial powers or states that want to expand don't stop and then say, okay, that's it for us now. They always want to try and take over essentially the entire world. That's what Britain did in the height of our colonial power. We didn't say, right, we're going to take a handful of countries and that's it. If we could, we would have occupied and taken over the entire world. That's what they do. So one day, if we don't stop Israel, they're going to come for us too, and they're going to say, well, actually, this is ours now. That is how foreign powers over the course of history work. If you look back in history and you look at all these big powers, they always shift and they always change. But the number one thing they want to do is take up as much land as possible. There is many reasons why, obviously economic reasons, power reasons, or even just religious reasons. There's always a different reason behind it, but it's the same thing. And that flag completely symbolizes what Israel is about. Also, part of that is, and I alluded to earlier when we were talking about the surveillance system, because also Smotrich said that we shouldn't have a Palestinian state because a Palestinian state would be an existential threat to Israel. That's very telling. If you think that other peoples should have a right to self-determination and their own state is an existential threat to you, that's a you problem. That just says that clearly your whole endeavor, the project of Israel, is one that is built on apartheid, genocide, and something that needs to be radically transformed, because the fact that you think external forces are a threat, simply just having a right to self-determination. And that speaks to the paranoia, I believe, when it comes to surveillance, and that's why they're surveilling on our allies. So it's very interesting. We also need to point out the fact, I know many people know this, but
Yeah. They just need to carry on doing that canvassing, door knocking, essentially. Leaflets. Obviously, getting these calls from other canvassers, essentially, that would probably kind of annoying. I get that. I've only ever done it once, so it's only ever happened to me once. I haven't went out canvassing, obviously. I can't. I'd be knackered and my joints would be swollen to hell. But they've got plenty of people over there that can go out and canvass, hand out leaflets, do talks. Yeah, they have to be careful of the complacency. They really do.
You know, Smotrich and Benjamin Netanyahu may sound like the most extreme people, but the Zionist project is all one of the same. Now, of course, if we were to somehow see the end of Benjamin Netanyahu and had another politician who was probably better at the PR, maybe moderated their language a little bit, that doesn't mean there's progress happening in Israel. The same thing is happening, maybe just a little bit slower. Essentially, we have to stop Israel before it expands into all different places across the Middle East. Obviously, that's not really looking like it's going to happen, because the only criticisms we're getting from Biden is, I'm really pissed off at Netanyahu in secret, yet he's still aiding and abetting Israel. He's still sending money. We're still selling arms to Israel to do this expansionist project. So we have to stop Israel in its tracks. Otherwise, this will grow and grow and grow, because colonial power never, ever stops by its own accord.
Yeah, part of the reason as well why certain types of colonialism in the past has been so damaging to the world is that when you mix colonialism and religion together, it's the most destructive force, right? Many people forget that a lot of the endeavors that the British Empire and other European powers went on, they were blessed by the Catholic Church or their religious advisors. I was reading very recently that when the Spanish went to the Americas, their religious advisors said to them that these people are a godless people, therefore they have no land and they have not been given that land by God, so therefore you can take it for your God. And when we think about that...
utter bollocks. Bad Catholic Church. That is utter bollocks. Just because they've got a different faith from you, they worship in a different manner, different gods, different ways of living, doesn't mean they're godless. Bloody disgusting. Bleh. Thank you. Yes, very true.
Smotrich is insanely religious. I can't genuinely think of a person in the UK who is he's more religious than the head of the Church of England. This guy genuinely believes that at any secular point that you can throw at him, the idea of self.
Do you think Jughead Bugger gives a blind damn about being the head of the church? He doesn't. At least I don't think he does. I'm not even sure if he goes to service every Sunday. Maybe he does to keep up appearances, but maybe he's busy doing other stuff. I really don't think he gives a fuck. Really don't think that.
Determination, it does not matter, because he is part of God's army, and that's a quote from him as well. He's part of the army of God. He's part of a religious movement which is empowered by their scriptures, and that cannot be argued with. It has to be defeated, and that's the only way we can do it.
Yeah, you can't negotiate with these people, which is funny because that's essentially the West position. Is look, I don't think that there are many people in our
Correct. I'm godless also. Welcome to the godless army of heathens, sweetie. I've been atheist for about the last, 45, the last sort of 17 years, essentially. I love religion. If people find faith and solace and live good lives in the religion that they're a part of, good for them. Many of the Marxists and communists I know here in Glasgow, a few of them are Catholic. They still go to Mass. They're good people. Just because you don't have a religion doesn't mean you don't have faith, or you don't have a good way of living, or have a good outlook towards other ethnicities, other religions, other races. Doesn't mean we're godless.
government, there are many people in the US government who are not big fans of Netanyahu. I know that it's correct to point out that we are complicit in the war crimes of Israel. That is absolutely true, but it doesn't mean that they particularly like Netanyahu. They think they can convince him and persuade him to stop doing less war crimes, which is not going to happen because, as I said, the man is almost irrelevant. It's the state itself. If a state is built on apartheid, built on blood, built on genocide, that is always going to exist that way, no matter who is in power in Israel. That's why it needs to be completely radically transformed to a secular nation. Whatever that looks like, I don't know. And that's a conversation many people are having. What is the future of the Middle East, of the region? Is it a one-state solution with Israelis and Palestinians living in there with equal rights? Is it a two-state solution? I mean, I feel like as
Correct,
the
Darling,
days go on,
yes.
two-state solution feels less and less untenable. But regardless, it needs to be radically transformed brick by brick, because it's not going to happen by simply, oh, look, guys, I know you're built on 75 years of blood, of apartheid, but do you think you can maybe like change now? It's not going to happen. It's never worked that way before. And it certainly won't happen again this way. It needs to be stopped.
Yeah. And as the same article from Haaretz points out, is that they believe that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are keeping this war going, and if they if there is a ceasefire deal, they will dissolve the government and collapse it. And obviously, as we know, Benjamin Netanyahu is on trial, and he's tried to influence the legislature, to influence the judiciary, which could affect his trial in his benefit, of course. So he needs to stay in power. So this war is continuing because Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, they want more land. They don't care about the hostages. They don't care how many people have to die for this, because they are religious extremists.
But I also want to say, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that in a way, imperialism is its own kind of religion. Like religion.
Well said, yeah. I've watched a few of Christopher Hitchens' videos. Obviously, his brother is... but yeah, the parties of God don't want it. Well, we've seen it in the past. Look at the Crusades. Essentially, that was about power and money and stuff like that. Yes, he is. I remember watching that, the Arabistani interviewing him. Dear God, I never managed to finish it. I think I got just to halfway and I thought, nope, can't do it. Former Trot, by the way, like Paul Mason. I'm surprised at how many of them, especially ones born in the 50s and 60s, how many of them are former Trots, like myself. I've managed to move on, but I've still stayed in the left. I can't believe I was a Trot when I was a teenager, bloody hell. Yeah. Oh yeah, completely beyond parody. He might be absolute garbage now, but between Cleese and Chapman, some of the best Monty Python ones written about religion were written by those two. Mostly Chapman, of course, mostly Chapman. He done most of the writing. Him and I think Palin wrote some as well. But it was mostly Graham Chapman. He's actually quite decent. Idealism infects teenagers, it does. We're not fully formed yet. Still trying to figure out who the hell we are. Ugh. That man is utter garbage now. Ugh. Just shut up, please. Nah.
Absolutely plays a role, as you just said. Imagine being an imperialist and a religious, a conservative religious person. It's a recipe for disaster. But imperialism is kind of its own religion because you don't have to be ultra religious in order to support expansionist policies.
Correct.
So it feels like imperialism in of itself is a religion. It must be done. And that, again, once that needs to be completely broken down across the entire world. It's also worth noting that before, in the early Zionist project, before the State of Israel was created, that area, Ottoman Palestine, as it
he wrote all the songs
because it was under the Ottoman Empire. That wasn't the only place they were looking at. They were looking at many other places. They were looking at South Africa, for example. And you just think that religion does play a big role here, but I think it's the imperialist colonial mindset was the biggest thing because they were looking at other areas. They were looking at settling in South Africa and many other places. Now, if it was purely down to religion, again, I'm not downplaying the aspect there, but if it was purely down to that, then it would be just it'd have to be in Palestine and that's it. No, they were willing to occupy and settle in any place. Obviously, it ended up being there. But that is just the colonial mindset once again.
Absolutely. But let's move on. We only have a little bit of time left. But if you like what we do and you want to help me not be late to the show, you can subscribe and share our content. We have got multiple people working for Turn Left. However, it's all still voluntary. In order for us to dedicate more time and not be late to Turn Left, please make us into a fully realised media organisation.
Oh, you're being too hard on yourself, Lewis. Don't worry about it too much. Seriously, man, you don't need to be so brutal on yourself.
You can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 a month, or any one-off donation at patreon.com.
I was just going to be watching this bit about Israel, and then I was going to move on to see how John McDonnell deals with Peston. That should be quite fun. It's Helena done it. I think she's done it at the start of her stream. So I was going to move over to that. My God, that took up half the runtime. Thank you, Lewis, and thank you, Curtis. That was brilliant. Okay, Helena, darling.
Have cut through by having a petition to make Freddos cheap again. It's this kind of thing I think we need to do more of. Because there was plenty of boring, political nerds who got frustrated by Ed Davey not taking things seriously about riding jet skis or some shit. And I'm like, well, actually, this was good voter engagement. No one knew who the fuck Ed Davey was at the start of the campaign. That guy had no profile whatsoever. And so, clearly, their strategy was, well, let's make a profile.
No problem, sweetie. Enjoy your movie, and I will stay awesome, obviously, because I'm me. You look after yourself, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Did you watch the John McDonnell Peston interview before you go? Or do you know what to look out for? Ah, you're already gone. Okay.
To do something that the media cannot ignore because there's no such thing as bad publicity. No one's gonna like explicitly not vote for you because you fell off a waterboard. Like,
No problem.
so you might as well make the most out of the coverage
Oh,
that you get by
Rory
doing all these different
Cats.
stunts.
Enjoy your movie. Bye-bye.
So I think
Okay.
there's plenty of room to try and find these kind of niche or tongue-in-cheek moments in politics to try and get it to go viral, to try and get the left more of a
Night,
platform.
night.
So I think that we should take the 5p Freddo's blueprint and apply that to how we do viral social media messaging on the left more often. Because Jeremy was really good at that in 2017. Everybody knew about, Jeremy Corbyn eating the Pringle, or Jeremy Corbyn making his jam, or doing the thing where he guested on The Last Leg, and they got him to walk out of a limousine dressed like a old school king or whatever. Like, all these little meme moments went viral to try and raise profile, and I think that we can do that again. And I think that that's the lesson. That's the lesson that you take from this Southport MP and from Fatima Payman about the way in which you try and garner publicity in a social media viral world. Nationalise Freddo's.
I like that. Well said, Helena.
No. Well, we'll be talking about that. We'll probably talk about that after we've watched the John McDonnell thing, Kit. Speaking of watching the John McDonnell thing, let's watch it.
I agreed with Keir's statement about the heaviest burden should fall upon those with the broadest shoulders, and that should be the basic principle of our taxation system throughout. Always has been in Labour Party history. That's why I think there is a need for a whole range of taxation measures, but the burden should fall on those that are the wealthiest, the richest, and the corporations.
We don't need to do that with teeny tiny Carla Denny. She needs to stay a grown-up technocrat. Well, I think that if you want a Green Party politician who we can use for social media purposes, I think the person who has the biggest cut-through is Zach Polanski. I think he has really good cut-through. He's charismatic and passionate, and that helps you. Whether or not he'll be able to tell jokes, maybe you can get like an Ellie Chowns or a Sean Berry to tell jokes. I mean, they're actually elected MPs. Like Sean Berry will probably do really good funny stuff, but I think she obviously takes herself pretty serious as well, as does Ellie, because she's also a serious individual. So I don't know, it's worth trying. It's worth trying at the very least.
Make the most profits.
But all the kind of analysis of the of what happens when you raise taxes, particularly for the wealthy and for big businesses, is that it can change behaviour and then become a negative in terms of the money that's brought in.
Most of that research that Hammond and Osborne, all the others used to drag out at every debate, most of that has been disproved.
John, great to see you. You have been involved in preparations for government when you were Shadow Chancellor. Are you surprised by how seemingly unprepared Keir Starmer and his team have been?
It's always difficult when you're going into a new job, but there's been a number of issues that have come up that has surprised me, really. If you look at the tactics that have been used up until now, I don't think it's a strategy, actually. I think they are tactics. It's pretty normal when you take over in government, you blame your predecessor for the mess you're in. Okay. And George Osborne did exactly the same. In fact, when I was hearing some of the statements, I closed my eyes. It was like George Osborne speaking in 2010 all over again. But you have to be measured about that because you can go over the top. And if you do go over the top, you're talking yourself into a bit of a doom loop, as someone's described it. That's the first thing. And the second thing that surprised me is if you're preparing for a budget like this and you're taking such a long time, What you don't do is announce a couple of policies in advance that then set hairs running. So the policy around the 2-child limit wasn't really a policy announcement, but it was reacted to in a way which sent a message that, oh my God, austerity is continuing and we're leaving children in poverty. And then I still cannot understand why the winter fuel announcement was made, particularly the way it was made without any sort of preparation of transitional arrangements or tapering, that sort of thing. So that sent a message out that we're in a hell of a state. Well, It is a toxic inheritance from the Tories, but the dogs in the street know that. We know that. And the second thing that sent the message out, well, actually, we might continue on with austerity. And that set an element of anxiety particularly in the Labour Party. And that's why we had such a downbeat conference, I think.
Yeah. So how are you feeling now with the budget coming up?
Worried. But I don't think people should be worried, because it's got to be a big budget, but all the solutions are there. It's not rocket science what needs to happen. And we're seeing some of it revealed already. On the investment side, fully agree with invest. We all do. But all we have to do is make sure we interpret the fiscal rule in a way that enables us to do that. And one of the things I did when I was a Shadow Chancellor in 2019, we changed the fiscal rule to what people are advocating now, which is net public sector worth, which would give you more flexibility on investment.
I mean, he's absolutely right, and that's what they should do. All of the justification for privatization in the 1980s would have been impossible to justify if you were talking about net government debt rather than gross government debt. If you take out debt but then accrue an asset because that's what you're spending the money on, then overall your balance sheet is still at zero. In the same way that when you buy a house, you may have a mortgage to pay for, but you've got a house. You have an asset that you've gained. You wouldn't be able to say, we've balanced the budget by selling off British Gas in the 80s if immediately your assets dropped with the entire value of British Gas equal to the amount you've just sold it for, especially when it massively jumped in value once it had been privatised. So that's one good thing about those fiscal rules. And second of all, it allows you to borrow to invest to your heart's content. Because as long as you're borrowing to invest and you can have a credible plan for how to recoup those outstanding debts through the extra revenue you'll get from the creation of those assets to pay for the interest, you can do as much as you want as long as you can justify it, as long as you can have those projections. So this is a break from fiscal orthodoxy that was part of John McDonnell in the crazy far left version of the Labour Party in 2019, quote unquote. And now it's becoming what people in the kind of centre left are having to admit to change what the fiscal rules they ran on during the election to be able to actually get us into position to be able to save the economy. So everybody who is trying to lie about some nonsense idea that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell coming into government would somehow be the death of the British economy, they're talking bollocks. They're talking absolute nonsense. Because he's right. He's absolutely right. And he's been proven right in the fact that, remember I mentioned the other day that the Tories copied their National Investment Bank policy and just turned it into the British Business Bank. Changed the ways in which they were lending money, but it was broadly the same thing. And now Labour are coming along, slapping the National Wealth Fund sticker on top of the National Infrastructure Bank and the British Business Bank, putting them together and saying we've done a thing when they've just taken Tory policy that was borrowed from Jeremy Corbyn and then saying that it's their thing. And I'm like, well, it's Corbyn things. Turns out Corbynomics, the things that we all supported in 2017 and 2019, it's just common sense, mate. It's just common sense. And Treasury orthodoxy, bunch of bollocks, bunch of bullshit, nonsense.
They're moving towards that. I think they should just get on and do it. And then on the revenue side, it is tough what we're inheriting, but you can't in any way go into a budget where you give any hint austerity is going to continue. And you've got so many different opportunities. We have to have a fair taxation system. But you interviewed Dan Needle, didn't you? He put forward about 20 different proposals that they could be considering. And it's that Will Hutton thing that he always goes on about, on taxation. Often you pluck the duck feather by feather. You don't kill the duck off, that sort of thing. So I think they've talked themselves into a bit of a problem, which is completely unnecessary because the solutions are there for a big budget and one that we need.
Did you have
broadband communism, which wasn't even going to cost that much? Yeah, exactly. All of the hand-wringing about the theoretical broadband communism, it was just agitprop. It was just agitprop for the private broadband companies.
Oh, I don't have it on multi-stream.
Just mad about the idea that they wouldn't have access to a really inelastic market to make loads of money off of people. That's it. It's the reason why the hysteria was there, nothing else. And it was treated like a silly policy when it's a really good policy. I mean, the messaging was bad. The messaging on it was bad, and the comms should have been better. But we're going to compare it to what Labour comms looks like now and try and pretend that Labour comms has in any way improved since then, because clearly it hasn't. But it's just the same way that like they poo-pooed the idea of planting, hundreds of millions of trees. And it was actually, countries do that all the time, but it was treated as a very ridiculous proposal. And now, instead of doing the normal thing, which is planting trees, we're asking to do bloody £22 billion of investment in carbon capture and storage, which is just a sop for the fucking petrochemical industry.
sympathy with them in the run-up to the election when they ruled out any increase in VAT, income tax, corporation tax, because of course that's about 75% of, those taxes, represent about 75% of all tax revenues in the UK. So they have severely constrained how they can raise money. Do you think that simply to, in a sense, bank the election victory, that was the right decision?
When I was Shadow Chancellor, I introduced similar sort of rules, but on income tax, for example, it would only be the wealthiest, the highest earners that would increase taxation.
But they haven't said that. They've actually protected those at the top as well.
I think they took a.
So if the Tories borrowed or stole Corbyn's economic policies, did they make sure that only the very rich benefited from them? So the original plan for the Corbyn's policy, first of all, was that it was supposed to be investments in cooperative businesses, so businesses from the ground up to be able to build a more inclusive and fair economy, which of course the Tories didn't do. And it's supposed to be investment for equity, which is similar to what's happening under Rachel Reeves. Whereas the Tories took that plan of having a state investment bank and then did it all as grants. So it wasn't actually money that was expected to get equity releases from. No, it was just money that was being spent, being given in subsidy to whichever favourite businesses of the government.
A step too far and therefore bound themselves in a bit too much. And on corporation tax, actually, I do think we do need to look at how corporations are taxed. I would have preferred more said about how we review tax reliefs to corporations at the moment. That might be something in the budget they're looking at.
I mean, I would just push back a bit on what you've said in the sense that if you look at the statistic that everybody wheels out on both sides of the political spectrum, the burden of tax, the share of national income taken by the government in tax is at levels we haven't seen since the war, right? If you then look at why that is, it is actually because companies and those on highest incomes are paying record sums.
But our overall tax burden is only like 37%, 38% I think it is now in recent times because of fiscal drag. And most Western European nations are like 41, 42%. We're already way lower than the other people, and we're still expecting European levels of public services on American levels of taxation, and that's just not a recipe for success. What do you think about people on the left that's saying the Treasury needs to be broken up / abolished? I think it should be reformed at the end of the day. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to get rid of entirely, but I think you could get the same results that you need by just doing reforms. This idea of fiscal dominance, in that you just set fiscal policy from number 10 and then you force from the top every other department just to kowtow to however you're structuring the economy to ensure that there's some kind of fiscal continuity. So like if you do broad scale fiscal policy, you just force the Bank of England, regardless of how independent they are, to follow your lead on policy and adjust rates accordingly. Because you just go, we're doing this fiscal policy. If you want to keep the economy in check, you have to do this monetary policy. And they go, well, I guess we're going to have to do it because you've set the fiscal rules, you've set the fiscal policy. So the Bank of England's autonomy and independence, they're only ever a function of what state fiscal policy is happening they have to respond to regardless. Hope you guys don't get national debt nerds like Joe Manchin. Well, we've got fucking loads of national debt nerds in this country, but they all work in media and politics. Whereas I think there are a lot of deficit hawks in the US population on the right, whereas even people on the right in this country don't even really care about the debt. I mean, people on the right would have forced themselves not to care about the debt because the debt massively rose under the Conservative Party.
Marginal rate of tax for people on average incomes is at its lowest level since 75. So there is an argument for saying if we want to have the public services that we believe we deserve, that everybody should pay a little bit more tax. Do you not think that's a credible argument?
I think there is a credible argument about how we have to convince people that actually taxation rates, if we want decent public services, taxation rates overall will have to go up over time. But when you're doing your first budget, you have to be careful about who you hit. And if you think that wages have virtually stagnated since 2008, and if you think people have gone through cuts on welfare benefits on a staggering scale, and we have we've got 14 million people in poverty, so therefore you can't put the burden on ordinary working people anymore. So what you've got to do is look at where you can, and where you can is on the wealthiest and the richest, and also on those that are making the most profits. And the levels of inequality in our society at the moment are grotesque. And the issue about inequality isn't just about income, it's about the quality of life for everyone.
But it is a chicken and egg. One of the reasons why living standards have stagnated is because austerity contributed to years of low investment, low growth.
Did it, Robert? Wow, you should have said literally anything at the time. when you spent the entirety of the Osborne and Cameron administration being somebody incredibly high up in terms of political media coverage in this country. If austerity was such a terrible economic policy, because it was, why at no point did you actually critique it, specifically on grounds of the fact that it would lead to a drop in investment? Because we knew it was stupid. Everyone on the ground knew it was stupid, but you were too busy wondering about the nonsense shit that Jeremy Corbyn was getting up to. Yeah, it's true. They had nice hair. They were sensible centrists compared to the scary jam man.
Activity not growing at the rate what it should have done, and some would say we were stuck in a doom loop. There is an argument that says not just that you borrow more to invest, but if everybody pays a bit more and much of that goes into productive investment, then you can in that way create a virtuous circle where the economy grows and everybody's better off.
That's why I agreed with.
I mean, yeah, I agree with Peston.
Keir's statement.
Again, just wish he'd been saying it 10 years ago.
About the heaviest burden should fall upon those with the broader shoulders. And that should be the basic principle of our taxation system throughout. Always has been in Labour Party history. That's why I think there is a need for a whole range of taxation measures, but the burden should fall on those that are the wealthiest, the richest, and the corporations make the most profits.
But all the kind of analysis of the of what happens when you raise taxes, particularly for the wealthy and for big businesses, is that it can change behaviour and then become a negative in terms of the money that's brought in.
Most of that research that Hammond and Osborne and all the others used to drag out in every debate, most of that has been disproved. In fact, usually it was around the timing by way the taxation levels increases was introduced.
But the IFS did some research on this, and they looked into the impact of increasing the higher rate threshold to 50%, and then found from that it actually does impact it negatively. So it's not just
No, that's not what the IFS said. The IFS said that specifically in the time period between the 50p and the pound rate being implemented or being announced and the overall implementation of it, in like the first 3 years of it, it didn't raise as much as expected just because people changed their tax arrangements from the announcement and then through the rollout. If it had been continued long term, it still would have raised money. I think she's misrepresenting this IFS study, which I have actually read. I know exactly which IFS study she's referring to here.
The Tories in this. It was independent institutions as well.
With the greatest respect to the IFS, I have the problem with their credibility.
Right.
I can remember, I know they're seen as the ex-cathedra statements about anything on the economy, but I do have a recollection in 2008 that they were telling us that the banking crash would just last 6 months and we'd all be back to normal.
And they got that wrong.
So they did, and they do on other things as well. But nevertheless, yeah, you have to be careful.
I can't believe they actually said that. That's mad. Only last 6 months. We're still paying the price for it now because of the bloody austerity that the Tories brought in. Ugh. And hearing Gideon getting mentioned again. Ugh. Man is a bloody monster.
I mean, I think it's difficult, John, to try and make a comparison between them getting a prediction wrong and them getting analysis of something that's happened previously wrong. I think what's happening here is that she's misrepresenting the study. I think the study is reasonable in its assumptions, but...
And that's why I think most economists at the moment, when they're advising the government on taxation measures, are saying, look at a whole panoply. You don't need to do necessarily big hits. You can take small amounts, but you need to make sure there's a concerted program and you explain it. But you explain the principles, and that principle that Keir's advocate, fully agree, heaviest burden on the broader shoulders.
There are some taxes, though, that particularly if you happen to have mobile skills, you can avoid. You just go abroad. So you do have to be careful about how you impose taxes on,
land or property infrastructure. They can't take it with them. 100%. I think that we need to be looking at completely revamping the way in which we tax property in this country. Not only the vast number of empty properties that are being used as investments not actually get taxed properly at all. We don't tax people based on land value, for example. I think I would support a land value tax. But people who own housing get charged council tax based upon those housing as a basic property tax. And the rates they pay are astronomically unfair because of the way in which they were valued in the fucking 1990s. So not only do we need to change how we tax rich people's houses, we also need to change how we tax poor people's houses as well. Because property tax at the moment in this country is totally screwed up. Completely screwed up.
Well said, Helena.
Your words, Keir Starmer's words, those with the broadest shoulders.
Yeah, there's a story that's
Addendum to that. We haven't actually done a check since the 90s when Helena said for how council tax is calculated. No government, none of them, they're too scared to go near it, because if they start to reform it and get the higher bands to pay more for their hundreds of thousands or £1 million properties, they'll lose all their they'll lose all their party members, and they'll lose their higher donors because they'll be paying more in council tax. That's why no party, no New Lib party since her, have ever done it. Obviously, she introduced a poll tax, and that went down like a lead balloon. But no party is ever going to touch it unless we get one that's ideologically correct in doing it and revaluing these properties. None of them have touched it. Too scared. Because if they do it, the higher bands, take my flat for instance, it's a band A. To 1-bedroom flat in the north of Glasgow. Band A. Mine would barely change because the value of this property, I'll be lucky if it's 50,000. I think even in its current state, I don't think it's even worth 30 grand, let alone 40. But the upper ones, so from like band F upwards, if they get done, party members who have those properties, they'll be up in arms. They'll start screaming and shouting and crying their little hearts out. Please, this is for my children and all that other nonsense. If you can afford to buy the house, you can afford to pay the council tax if it goes up, right? But none of the parties, none of them have touched it. Too scared.
Going the rounds at the moment about, and I think the IFS have commented on it as well, which, you know, we'll have these people leaving the country and all this. The interesting thing, it's anecdotal. When you look at the evidence, it doesn't stack up, but it's anecdotal. And yeah, of course, you just have to pitch it at the right level. But you also, what you have to do is prepare the ground by having the debate. And we do need a debate about taxation. At the moment, I think it's about introducing a panoply of measures, a whole range of measures. But then after this budget, we do need to have a look again at some of the longer term issues particularly around how we tax land value in this country. And then secondly, wealth overall. And it's interesting, Rachel Reeves,
Based in Georgism pill, John McDonnell here.
Did a booklet 7 years ago, I think it was, Everyday Economics. It was great. I brought her in for a cup of tea. I said, this is fantastic. In fact, actually, most of the policies we're advocating. I didn't want to accuse her of plagiarism, of course, but I said to her, look, anything you want to lead on, let me know. But she's like, I'm busy on other stuff, fair enough. But she included in that book things like looking at wealth, but also looking at land value taxation.
So land tax, I mean, I actually heard her on Britain out in paperback.
£20 each that he has to give us every time he
whenever,
plugs his book.
I advertise my own book, I have to give Steph a couple
Broad
of tenors.
shoulders and all that.
But anyway, I do advocate a land.
Shut up, Heston. Stop shilling your book. People want to buy it. You're well known enough. If they want to buy your book, they'll buy your book. You're here to interview John McDonnell, not shill your book. You're not the one getting interviewed. You're the interviewer.
Tax. It does seem to me to be disappointing that actually this is just not something that's debated properly. This doesn't have to be a left-right issue. You know, land is not properly taxed, and it's one of the few taxes that, you know, you can't take land outside the country, so you can be guaranteed of the income.
I'm
I mean, on top of it being a guaranteed income for a land value tax, the other big thing about land value tax is that it taxes rentiers. Land as value generates value by existing as capital, not because the land itself is productive. You can use that capital to create productivity, but that involves using the land to create to add productivity to. It's what you add to the land that makes it productive, not the land itself. So land as a broad commodity only gets used for rentierism, and this is something that Adam Smith talks about in The Wealth of Nations, about the land as a commodity kind of breaks open like the market dynamics, and again it is only ever used as rent. So the important thing about a land value tax is it stops and disincentivizes parasitic rentierism in your economy. So I really do support a land value tax for that specific measure.
I think I'm the president of the land value tax campaign or whatever it is. I haven't got the badge yet, but I think I am. But if you go back to all those, the debate around Henry George and his ideas and all this, that's a debate that's worth opening up again, because I think people do think there's an issue there that could be addressed fairly readily, but everyone's terrified of doing anything around council tax and things like that because of the experience of poll tax. But if you start the debate now, we can educate people into the implications of what land value tax
So
could
you
be.
think it's the scars of the poll tax that deter what you might call conventional politicians from talking about this?
And people, you know, it brought the government down virtually, didn't it, in terms of Mrs. Thatcher's administration. But if you start the debate off, and exactly as you say, it's one of those elements that you can't avoid, and actually I think could be readily collectible. But it's not the sort of thing you do in your first budget, but you lay the trail for future debates for a future budget. And I think you could build consent.
There's another thing, right, is that a lot of people get mad about inheritance tax, but a lot of the thing that gets inherited the most is property and land. The aristocratic families that have coasted, who've stolen a living for however long, they do so because they have historic land that they pass down from person to person, as you say, owned by the same family for a very, very long time. And you could potentially look at changing the way, or you could completely absolve property values from inheritance tax, which would make a lot of people who do inherit things like property from like lower classes a lot less unhappy, because they wouldn't be paying tax they think they shouldn't pay. And it wouldn't matter that you weren't taxing these big property owners when they inherit property from their parents, because they would have paid all of that value in land value for the entirety of the time in which they owned that particular property or that particular land. How does land value tax penalise rentierism? Because land is used entirely for rentierism as a commodity. If you tax whenever you tax anything, you disincentivize it. Like one of the primary functions of tax is to use it as a disincentive. So I talk about on stream is in that we tax people who are productive in this country, people who have jobs, who actually produce new commodities, who are the backbone of the wealth creation in the society, because wealth creators are not rich people. Wealth creators are people who do work, who are productive. It's productive people who create wealth. And we tax people with productive jobs at 40% if they're in the higher rate, for example. And if you're a higher rate taxpayer for capital gains, you pay 20-something%. So it is more lucrative if you're making a choice between, do I do £40,000 a year job or £50,000 a year job earning money being productive? Or I could do the same kind of, or I could get a different way of making money, which is the same amount in capital gains. The choice is already made for you by the incentives of the tax system. That's why taxing something is a disincentive. You're disincentivizing productive work by taxing it more than unproductive work. Because capital gains isn't work. It's not work at all. It's the absence of work. So you have to tax capital gains, as far as I'm concerned, less to raise funds for the state, but more importantly, to ensure that there is at least a decent balance between whether or not you incentivize people to do something that's unproductive or productive. Won't landlords just pass the tax on to their renters? No, because prices are set by the intersection of the supply and demand curve. When you tax something, you're not changing the supply or the demand of the commodity. That's determined by the people who want to spend the money on the commodity and the amount of commodities that are produced. Especially in the case of land or in the case of property, when the market is inelastic. It's much harder to... No, sorry. I've got that the wrong way around, sorry. In inelastic markets, like, you would need to have other measures. Sorry, you need to have other measures. But because there is an ability to have... It's much easier to corner an elastic market, sorry. But it's just like when people, so Dan Neal talks about this a lot as well, in how they keep talking about like the pink tax or whatever, and like, well, no, when you do a tax cut on a commodity, the tax cut doesn't make the commodity cheaper. Like, if you cut VAT, for example, if you cut VAT, it doesn't make the product any cheaper. All that it does is increase the margin for the people who sell the commodity. Because the price of the commodity is set at the intersection of the supply and demand curve. If you reduce the tax, they know that if they're selling a product at £20 after VAT is added, and you cut the tax, they're not going to sell it for £19 when the supply demand curve meets at £20. They're going to keep that and keep it as profit. They can't raise the price because they'll get outcompeted by the other people who are selling said commodity. Like when the government took 5p off fuel duty and the supermarkets didn't adjust their price. Exactly. Because the prices were set by the intersection of the supply-demand curve. The government just gave 5p to the petrochemical industry.
Around it.
Can I ask you just on borrowing to invest? And we've argued on this program that she should be bolder in terms of borrowing for productive investment. One of the things that I'm literally staggered by, you say that
she needs to borrow for capital investment. She needs to borrow so she can bring back the water companies into public ownership. She needs to borrow to bring lots of these things back into public ownership. She needs to fund the NHS properly. She shouldn't be going after people like me, because we've been through enough. We can't be arsed. Seriously, we've got demonised. Told we were scummy little scroungers and fakers, that we should go back to work, become a productive member of society. Excuse me, a lot of us are very ill. We struggle to move around. So no, don't come after people like us. Go after the upper echelons. Yeah, I agree with the land value tax. That would be bloody awesome. She won't do it. And yeah, I'm scared for this budget. I really am. Ugh.
You'd already recalibrated the fiscal rules in advance of the 2019,
with some 2017,
in advance of the 2017-2019 general elections. We didn't have serious fiscal rules till Gordon Brown introduced them as Chancellor. But if I look at the amount of detailed preparation that he did in opposition, right? I mean, it's off the charts.
It was,
more than, for all that people respect Rachel Reeves, they just haven't done the preparatory work that Gordon Brown and Ed Balls did back in 96, 97. And in particular, the one thing that I am literally genuinely staggered by, is they are still nailing down their fiscal rules, which does seem extraordinary.
On the Gordon Brown experience, I fully agree with you. I was Chief Executive of Local Government Association then. And I can remember sitting in meeting after meeting after meeting in looking at different aspects of local government finance in particular at that point in time. And we were producing papers coming out of our ears. It was staggering, really, the preparation that went on. Didn't always listen to us, but actually had the debate. In this, I don't know how much preparation has gone on. Look, my position in the Labour Party is...
But they're still trying to work out how to calibrate the rule on how you borrow to invest.
I agree.
That's a fact.
I agree. My position in the Labour Party is, at best, I'm shouting through the letterbox, basically.
We'll come back to your position in the Labour Party.
But I mean, again, Peston is making a really important point here, is that the people that we just elected to government, who we were told for months on end were the adults in the room, the sensibles who are going to take charge and do politics properly like serious adults, haven't got a fucking clue.
Frightening. Very frightening.
They tried to claim that they had this grand plan on how they were going to govern, that they had ensured they had the highest quality candidates and a cabinet who were going to hit the ground running. And they've just been fucking running around like headless chickens. Just changing things and saying things that the public hate, like they haven't got a clue with the people that they were supposed to be interacting with in the months up to the election who elected them. Like, Peston is absolutely right to say that this has been an absolute shambles. And we'll come on to the UK... We'll come on to the first 100 days of Starmer's premiership later on, of course.
This is what I know where you are on all that.
From what I know, like you, I am a bit anxious about the lack of preparation, definitely. And also the fixation on the fiscal rule. Remember, Gordon Brown introduced one. Yeah. Then George Osborne denigrated any concept of a fiscal rule, then introduced one himself. And then they went through, I think, 8 different fiscal rules at one point in time. So it can become a bit of a fetish. And you have to be careful about making sure you've got the flexibility within it to do what you want.
And also, just like from a Labour perspective, no one cares about what the fiscal rules are, do they? Well, they just want to know, are things going to get better?
Well, the international markets do care about how you're behaving, whether you're setting rules and you're abiding by them. But you build the rule to give yourself the flexibility. And that's all I'm arguing for at the moment, particularly with regard to capital spend.
But can I just ask you, though, on the second rule, which nobody ever talks about, which is her second rule is different from Jeremy Hunt's. Her second rule is over a still as yet unspecified period, and she hasn't specified the period, day-to-day spending will be matched by taxation, i.e. she will not borrow to finance things like civil servants, public sector wages, welfare and all the rest of it. Is that, in your view, a sensible rule?
I didn't want to go into an election on the basis of having to borrow.
That is stupid. She shouldn't be doing that. She needs to be borrowing. Fund the benefits agency, fund the DWP, help support people like me, and help people who are job seekers, it used to be, but universal credit, to go and get a good productive job, a decent paying job. Personally, I'd want an excellently paying job. I don't know if any of them would hire someone that had been on the dole for over a decade at this point. But I doubt she's going to do that. I severely doubt it. She needs to be borrowing for capital investment for the country. She really does. But we'll find out, see what she's going to do. Wonder when they're going to start dropping stuff into the news. A Labour source said, the Labour backbencher said, blah, blah, blah. This will be in it, blah. Saying they're to talk about blah measure getting done and shit like that. That should probably be starting this week, come to think of it. So watch this space. See what little nuggets gets dropped into the news. See what kind of frightening shit she's coming up with.
for day-to-day expenditure.
Right, so you agree with that rule?
But as long as you're willing on the income side to look at taxation effectively, you can manage that. That's no problem whatsoever.
But she's closed down her options when it comes to taxation.
I think that's why I think by ruling out such vast swathes of taxation as sacrosanct and not touching is a problem that we'll have to confront.
Can I just ask you? You said right at the beginning of all this.
What's frustrating as well is that they went into the election. They explicitly went into the election with this promise that they mentioned just now of not increasing taxation on working people. So they were ruling out raises in the rates of national insurance for employees, income tax, PAYE, and VAT in terms of where they were going to be getting taxation from. And straight off the bat, they just lied. Straight up lied, because they already committed to, I think it was 2 years or something, of fiscal drag, to drag people into higher tax brackets by not raising those rates or not raising the thresholds in line with inflation. They are keeping the thresholds the same, so people get pulled into higher and higher tax brackets every single year. So whilst the rates aren't going up, there are plenty of times where Labour politicians went into interviews saying, we are not raising income tax, when they explicitly are, absolutely, in real terms. They were raising the rates of they were raising income tax broadly. The tax take from income tax was going to go up because of fiscal drag. They weren't specific enough to say the rate of income tax. Because it's true, they aren't raising the rate of income tax, but they are raising the level of income tax through fiscal drag. I tried to call in to Keir Starmer on LBC to ask him this very specific question, and LBC wouldn't let me, the bastards.
It's about how, now is not the time in this budget to, put more tax on working people. But we know the inheritance is really bad. This is obviously...
Too scared, Helena. Too scared. Whenever they come up against a competent person, especially someone like you. Too scared. What a coward, really. You're meant to be taking these calls from the constituents of the country. But no. God forbid us or petit pours actually ask you what the hell you're doing, or you're planning to do, or why you're not doing blah.
The start of their term in government. So why not? Isn't this the time to literally get all the bad news out of the way?
Because there's so many other ways that you can do it,
But this is the time now people will accept it, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, they can blame the Tories.
I don't think they will. It's been too tough on people. It really is. And when you're a constituency MP in a working class, multicultural community like mine, you're hard up against it. And you see how tough it is for people in work, not just those out to work or whatever. And people are really struggling. So sometimes you're tipping people over the edge. We've even seen that with the winter fuel allowance policy. So I think now's not the time to even consider that.
So can I just ask you, though, about one element of the sort of politics of all of this? Keir Starmer, both said no increase in the rates of income tax. Some of your colleagues have said to me, there is a sort of loophole here, and it's in that area of hypothecation. Horrible word. And what it means is she could invent a special new tax. She could call it the NHS tax. And she would say, right, we're going to levy 2p in the pound on everybody, and all the money goes to the NHS. I suppose a couple of questions. A, do you believe in hypothecated taxes like that? Do you think that there is a role for them? Many economists would say, actually, money doesn't know where it comes from. It's a complete fiction. It just goes into the general pot, even if you call it hypothecated, separated. But second of all, do you think British people would feel conned? Because many people would just say, well, it's a con. You said, no, it is basically an income tax. You've just given it a different name.
Yeah. Can you remember the Conservatives introduced on council tax, that special additional levy, which was meant to be for social care? People didn't see it going towards social care. People felt conned at that point in time as well. On hypothecation, as Shadow Chancellor...
I mean, that was a justification for just slashing state funding for councils more. Like, the central funding kept going down, and they just replaced it by taxing people within the council. catchment area more.
Or if you're a chancellor, the last thing you want is hypothecation because you want the flexibility. But if you're the Secretary of State for Health, yeah, you would want hypothecation because you want the guarantee of the income.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying, should Rachel Reeves look at this? That's where I'm
I
asking you.
think it's a mistake. I think at the moment you need to go out there with the broad arguments, give yourself the flexibility, both in terms of the range of taxation measures.
And also people's trust in politicians. It is like an all-time nadir. Like, we are at the nadir of trust in politicians. So if you invent a new tax without putting it in your manifesto, having promised to not raise taxes broadly outside of the burden and falling upon the richest, then people are going to feel conned by you because you're using special politician speak, which has been basically their modus operandi from day one. So they can't triple down on that without pissing loads of people off.
But also how you invest.
But on a local level, though, I think, I come from the Northeast in Middlesbrough, high deprivation, rubbish infrastructure and all that jazz. If there was a tax,
Thank you.
Fucking neoliberalism.
Thank you, Shami Sengupta, for the $4.99. Used to respect Peston, since his role in Corbyn Gate can't even take him seriously. It's been interesting watching him throughout all this period, in that he had a really long and quite thoughtful tweet that he put out, because he's got Twitter Blue, because he's a high-level journalist. And he did a whole thing talking about the conflation of criticism of Israel with kind of weaponized anti-Semitism, or weaponized accusations of anti-Semitism. I thought it was really thoughtful, and then I just thought, hang on a minute. This, maybe you should have thought about that when people were doing this explicit thing to try and demonize the jam man himself.
and you mentioned council tax and that add-on for social care, if there was an element of it you knew was going to transport and you saw a genuine change in the transport in your area, a kind of localised hypothecated tax might have more impact.
I think that's a good argument. And then if you linking that to land value taxation, that sort of thing, you could have much more democratic decision making about what happens at the local level. But at the national level, you endanger yourself because you get trapped into having a lack of flexibility of how you need resources, because issues can change over time. We can have a crisis on one area where you need to get money into it, a policy area, very, very quickly, and you've tied yourself up.
So I've got to pin you down. You've said the broadest shoulders have to pay more. So what are we talking about? A new top rate of tax? Are you talking about putting it up to 50%? Are you talking about raising the rate of corporation tax? Or are you talking about reducing allowances for businesses? What rate of capital gains tax do you think we should have? Talk us through what you would do.
If you look at the panoply of taxation measures that people have been putting forward, the most obvious one is equalising capital gains tax with income tax. And we've argued that for a long period of time.
I mean, even though, for example, and you've said you're not a great respecter of the IFS, but the IFS does say that without reform of CGT, that would drive quite a lot of people to relocate, re-domicile, and there would be less money.
You can link it with reform. Of course you can. But you need to level up because people see it grotesquely unfair, to be honest. Why when you go to work, you come in, you're on PAYE, you're paying at such a rate, and with capital gains, you're paying at so much lower. So there's a whole range of things like that.
And it's not just unfair, it's bad for the economy, as I said, because you're disincentivizing people who are productive. If you make money from capital gains, you do nothing. You do not contribute anything of value to society if all you do is live off of capital gains. You have produced nothing, you have created no wealth. The value of your capital has risen broadly because of factors outside of your control, and you're reaping benefits for no reason. And it's mostly rich people doing this. And you're incentivizing people to sit around and not be productive. Like, a world in which you incentivize landlordism is a world in which you destroy your own economy because huge swathes of your population aren't fucking working. They're not doing any work. It's terrible. It's stupid, right? It's just basic statecraft.
And there's, in terms of the whole range of measures that are out there, as I said, there's a small number of issues that you can address.
The top rate of tax, would you put it up?
As you address all of those, then you come to income tax itself. I would address the top rate as we did in the 2019 general election. You would put that up to the 50%, that sort of thing. And I'd look at the higher levels too. So I think that's worth floating at this point in time, definitely.
There'll be a lot of people listening to this and hearing you say that, which would lead panic in their heads. It might be entrepreneurs, people who are worried about capital gains taxes. The thing that most business people are saying to me now when, I'm around at different events with entrepreneurs, like,
The thing is, if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, you only really play capital gains if you sell your company. And at this point, I'm just like, we are selling our whole fucking company, mate. Like, why, take the rough with the smooth here, at the very least. Maybe there is more important things to care about than, you know, maybe you should be happy with the fact that you're being able to make a load of money off of selling a company. When you get paid out from your company, you're mostly getting paid in your salary and also in share dividends. Like, and dividends tax is also still cheaper than income tax.
Like, oh my God, what's going to happen to capital gains tax? We're really worried about that. We've built our business from nothing, and now we're going to get, you know, this big taxation. And so what would you say to the people who are hearing this thinking, oh my God, you're going for the people who've created wealth? And that are the words we're hearing from Keir, is it's about wealth creation.
Oh, and I hate this argument that the wealth creation comes from entrepreneurs. No, it comes from the people they employ. They do the productivity. Like, the basic understanding of how commodities are produced in the economy is through the production function, which is the combination of nature, technology, capital, and labor. The only thing here, right, that is necessary 100% throughout of this to be able to produce anything, the whole thing hinges on, is labor. If you do not have labor, it doesn't function. Simple as that. Because you can homestead without capital to create commodities out of nature and labor. You do not need to necessarily have capital to be able to do that. There's a really great video, actually. I mean, it also kind of poo-poos the idea of labor being the ultimate creator of all value, and the value as a holistic value. The way in which we judge value is far more holistic than that, and it's a justification for wealth redistribution anyway. So making everybody should get what they earn, as if labor is a metric, as if you can somehow quantify how much labor somebody's done to earn their share of what society has produced. Like, I think that those kind of basic workerism arguments that you get from law of value style Marxist understandings of the economy, I think they're really misguided. And this video by Matt Bruenig is really good at elucidating this principle. It's called "You Don't Deserve Your Pay." The video, you should all go watch it. But the main explanation is, well, actually, within no one really can justify themselves as being like the fulcrum on which all production relies on. But of course, I believe labor is at the top, at least as the most important one out of the four. But we should also just be looking at our distribution in society based upon, you know, needs rather than based upon what the market hath decreed.
It's about growth, but you're going to hit the people who are doing it.
It's the workers who create the wealth. So they go to work.
But the business people provide them with the jobs.
No, the business people come up with ideas, but it's the workers who create the wealth. And that's a partnership, of course it is. So therefore, in that partnership, let's all be treated equally. So therefore, if I create the wealth and I have an income come in on a wage basis, and the others make their contribution, and they, as a result of capital gains, we should all pay the same. It's just about making it fair.
But the argument from businesses is now, again, I was with quite a few last week who were, you know, they're not big corporations. We're talking people who are running maybe a couple of shops or whatever. They're dealing with, you know, the mental health crisis of some of their workers. They're dealing with all of the pressures they have in terms of their costs. Some of them aren't taking a salary.
Yeah. You know who is the most hard done by when workers have mental health problems? It's their bosses. Those are the people who really have the most to fear from a mental health crisis amongst the underpaid workers of this country, is that it might make life a little bit harder than being a boss. Oh, boo-hoo! Oh, boo-hoo, bosses, poor, hard done by bosses, having to deal with the mental health problems of other people. Jesus Christ, how disconnected do you have to be?
Because they're, you know, making sure their workers get paid. And then the concern is they're just going to be hit the hardest, because the assumption is, oh, you're a business owner, you're wealthy.
No, it's just trying to say, but let's be fair. It's not about hitting any particular group. It's not discriminating against any group either.
I mean, I want to hit a particular group, but he's right.
It's just making sure we have a fair taxation system where we all pay and pull our weight.
But what do you do in a UK where for, I think it's 24 of the last 30 years, the rate of investment in the UK, the overall share of the national income, which has gone to investment, has been the lowest of the G7 rich countries, which has been directly...
Use the state to invest. It's as simple as that. That's what Joe Biden's been doing over in America. They ran 7% deficits and just fucking threw state money at investment. Really not a bad idea. It's worked. They've got the biggest growing economy in the world at this point, or one of.
Related to why we grow so slow, why productivity hasn't increased enough, and why living standards haven't increased enough. Now, some of that low investment is low government investment, but frankly, an enormous amount of it is low private sector investment. So how do you, if you're putting up taxes on businesses, how do you create the conditions for them to invest more?
Well, you know better than me because you've written about it. If you have an increasing level of public investment, that will attract private investment, and you grow the economy overall. And again, it's not rocket science. It's just...
I mean, he's absolutely right here too. And what's important to understand is that for a very long period in the way people talked about economics in this country in a kind of post-neoliberal world, the failing orthodoxy was the opposite of this, was that if you overinvest by the state, you crowd out private sector investment because the private sector feels like they're competing with the state. And what the austerity period has shown us is this isn't true. This is complete nonsense, and the lack of state investment has led to a collapsing economy or a stagnating economy in which private investors don't want to invest because they don't feel like they're going to be able to make a return because, you know, society has fallen apart, because the public realm has fallen apart. So they don't believe that workers are going to have enough money to buy their products, so they invest elsewhere. We also have other problems like energy prices, etc., etc. There are myriad factors that, of course, our investment adhere. But the idea that if the public sector would have invested, it would have crowded out private investment, rather than creating the fertile ground for a growing economy in which private sector also wants to invest, like we're seeing in the United States right now, is proven that we're correct on the nature of public and private investment, not the neoliberals, who essentially, I think, as far as I'm concerned, made up this idea of the crowding out of private sector investment by overinvesting from the state, just as a way of stopping the state from investing ever. Because it clearly hadn't worked. Clearly hasn't worked at all. You have to have a thriving and growing economy. Like, if you invest from the state, that will make the workers richer. Expansionary fiscal policy pushes up wages. If workers have more to earn, under a Keynesian-style policy in which you look at the economy, demand-side policy, supply will increase to meet the new demand. And that's where the private sector will want to invest. Oh, workers have all this money to spend. I'm going to go and invest in the UK because people will be able to buy my fucking shit. Like, it's really not difficult to understand. It's just for so long we bought into a bunch of garbage neoliberal orthodoxy that demand increases would always need to increase in inflation, and the supply would never meet demand, and you always had to have a balanced budget, and you couldn't do fiscal expansion to be able to smooth out the business cycle, right? All of this nonsense groupthink that came out of neoliberal orthodoxy, just proven to be 100% incorrect in a post-2008 world. 100% incorrect.
With huge mistakes were made in the austerity period, and I think possibly one of the biggest mistakes was to cap investment. And so public investment always creates opportunities for private investment, and as a result of that, everyone benefits. And I literally, that was one of my biggest criticisms of the austerity years. And I thought, these are Tories. I thought they were supposed to come from a business background and know this. They didn't.
So this...
The problem that you have there, John, is that Tories are shit at economics. They were terrible at economics under Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. They were terrible at economics under Cameron and Osborne. They were terrible at economics under John Major. They were terrible at economics under Margaret Thatcher. They were terrible at economics under Ted Heath. There has never, ever, 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 outside of Harold Macmillan, been a conservative administration that hasn't done a bunch of stupid shit with the economy. Like, the Barber boom essentially gave us the conditions for the winter of discontent. Thatcher destroyed the economy wholesale, stripped away communities, sold off our assets for short-term gain, threw away bountiful oil wealth in the North Sea to make her mates richer and pay for her dole cures, where she deliberately increased unemployment to try and bring prices down rather than through other measures. John Major did stupid shit to cause Black Wednesday, and David Cameron and George Osborne did the dumbest economic policy of all time, which was economic austerity. There has never been a Conservative government, at least not since the 1950s, that hasn't been fundamentally terrible at managing the economy. Everyone who tries to tell you that the Conservative Party is fiscally responsible hasn't got a fucking clue what they're talking about.
This seems to me to be the nub of the issue now for Rachel Reeves. She's actually inherited a situation where investment, public sector investment, is declining in real terms, right? That is what she inherited from Jeremy Hunt. The amount that she now has to find to get that up is really quite considerable. It's many, many, many billions. Yeah. So your view would be the absolute number one priority for her ought to be to create the space for 20, 30 billion pounds.
And the worst part is that, you know, I have my criticisms of the Labour Party in terms of managing the economy, mostly from the left. I think that there are plenty of things you can criticise for Blair and Brown not reining in the financial sector with stronger prudential regulation, for example. I would criticise Harold Wilson for buying into Treasury groupthink and devaluing the pound unnecessarily. I think that you can probably blame Labour's inability to have revolutionary thinking about economic policy. Not massively revolutionary, but at least kind of partially revolutionary, for why Labour gets such a broad kind of stigma against their economic policy, because they've just been following Treasury orthodoxy a lot. They've been too similar to Conservatives to try and break the spell of seeming fiscally reckless, when the Tories are the ones who have always been fiscally reckless, and therefore imitating them is imitating their fiscal recklessness. And what's frustrating is that whenever you point out to people, well, actually, every Tory government has been terrible at managing the economy, apart from Harold Macmillan. When you try and point that out, they always respond with, oh, well, Labour are worse. And I'm like, they're not perfect. I have criticisms, but in no way are they worse. Oh, but Gordon Brown sold the gold. And I'm just like, how is this in the scale of how you're going to critique people on fiscal policy? How is making a poor decision with when we sell our gold in any way in the same level of is economically illiterate as the George Osborne austerity years? As everything that led up to Black Wednesday and the exchange rate mechanism, the Liz Truss mini budget, the privatisation of so many important sectors of our economy in the 1980s, the sell-off of the oil. Is Gordon Brown making a poor choice with selling off the UK's gold reserves in any way comparable to any of these like catastrophically terrible economic policies from the Barber boom all the way through till today? Absolutely not. In no sense of the words is Gordon Brown selling the gold at the wrong time in any way comparable whatsoever. It's nowhere near as bad. And yet they just bang on it over and over and over again, as if it's somehow this trump card they can play to justify all the terrible economic policies the Conservatives have ever done. Just go like, oh, well, they may have done Black Wednesday and privatisation and the Barber boom and austerity and the mini budget, but did you hear about Did you hear about Gordon Brown selling off the gold? And I'm just like,
oh, shut up about the gold. That's annoying as hell. I wish they wouldn't mention it.
Just get real, mate. Just get real. Proximity to physical currency is negatively correlated to human empathy, and there is science to prove that. There is science to prove that being rich makes you a sociopath.
Yeah, there is. Plenty of studies have been done as well.
maybe more than that, of additional public sector investment every year.
You've got to.
Exactly. That's what should be done. Will it happen? Doubtful. But what do I know? I'm not an economist or a chancellor.
It's not the number one priority, but it is a priority.
Why is it not the number one priority?
Because we've got to tackle poverty.
But won't that be the route to tackling poverty?
It will help, but we've got some people living in such dire. We've got 4 million children in poverty. We've got 1 million children classified as living in destitution. So that's a bit of a priority for most of us, I hope. But in terms of investment, it's that sort of scale of investment. But you've got to be realistic as well, because to invest on that level, you've got to have the capacity in the economy to do it. So I think what people are looking for is, what is your plan over the next 5 to 10 years, possibly, about how you gear up that level of investment. People know you can't do that overnight, but give yourself the capacity to do that, because I think people will be surprised at how quickly you can get that money out there and invest. Can I just give one example from yesterday? I had a discussion yesterday. This is how dire things are. There was a meeting yesterday with students, teachers, people involved in the education sector. And they said, look, we're looking for capital investment in education. 80% of our schools have still got asbestos in them. And we've had 300 teachers die of asbestos-related.
What the fuck? Why the hell is there still schools with asbestos in them? That's criminal. Get it fixed. I didn't realise it was that bad. Holy fuck. That's disgusting. Seriously, why?
Conditions since 2010.
Have we? I didn't know that.
Well, I was really shocked when I heard that figure. The NEU was talking about it. And they said, what we need to do is we need about 13 billion to retrofit our schools in particular to tackle the carbon issues that we have. And it would create 20,000.
And again, another instance of the Conservative Party being terrible at managing an economy. Instead of spending normal amounts of money to be able to refit asbestos over time, to try and go through like a school renovation program that was proposed by Gordon Brown in the dying days of the Labour administration, that would cost a small amount of money in comparison to how much it's going to cost to have to retrofit the entire of these huge numbers of schools in this country that still have this, that still have reinforced autoclaved rated concrete. You're going to have to pay all of that money to do all those retrofits, plus you're now going to have to spend all this money to deal with the healthcare problems from people with asbestos poisoning in 2024, asbestos poisoning in 2024, plus, potentially having to deal with school closures because of the potential for the roofs to cave in.
That is sickening.
They literally had roofs that were collapsing that they didn't fix whilst the sun was shining.
Oh, that phrase, I wanted to slap him when he said that one. Shut up, Gideon.
1,000 jobs. And I thought, my God, I didn't even know that. But that's the sort of scale of investment that's needed in just one sector. But you need to, and they were realistic about it. They say, we're looking at a 10-year program to do that. And I thought, this is a really good, detailed plan, but actually desperately needed.
I'm really interested in you talking about this idea that the number one priority is poverty, and particularly children. It's something Robert and I both, with the various charity stuff we do as well. And and I meet those kids, I see those kids quite regularly. And how do you solve it? Because what is the answer to, because that is like my biggest beef in life. I think it's the thing that gets us out, it gets us productivity and growth if we invest and make sure our kids are all right.
Yeah.
Give the children money. One of the biggest lies that right-wingers say all the time, right? One of the biggest lies that the right constantly tells as a kind of aphorism. There's no truth behind it. It literally is just an aphorism. It's a story they like to tell, is that we can't throw money at poverty to make it go away. You absolutely 100% can. If you've got people in poverty, give them money, and they'll be less likely to go into poverty. We have loads of studies to show that you just reduce poverty by throwing money at the problem. It is bandied about like an aphorism, because if it were true, which it is true, then that would mean centuries of conservative statecraft and policy making would have been explicitly to create poverty. And they would realize that it was their fault that the poverty rate was so bad. And they don't want to have to reconcile that. So they have to create a get-out clause as to why they couldn't do it. And what they always say is, well, you can't throw money at poverty to get rid of it. You have to get people to lift themselves up by their bootstraps. And if they don't do it, it's their fault. Which essentially absolves them of all.
You can't punish someone for the conditions in which they were born into. We didn't choose where we were born, how we were born, when we were born, what era we were born into. We can't. There's no way for us to reconcile that at all. So yeah, throw money at it. Who'd have thought giving poor people money would make them better off? Being able to look after their kids, their households, go to their jobs. And asbestos in schools, what the fuck? That is ridiculous.
All sin. It absolves all policy sins. If you go, well, we couldn't actually do this for you. We couldn't have done a policy that would have solved this because you can't just throw money at a problem to make it go away. You've not solved it yourself, therefore I can blame you and not me. But of course, the opposite is true. The opposite is true.
How the hell am I meant to... How the hell is a child or their parent meant to fix the rack or the asbestos in the school? Seriously. That is utter nonsense. Only the government can do that.
Some people do not have the ability to pull themselves up by their bootstraps because of the material conditions they're born into. And the state absolutely has the power to change that and could literally do it by throwing money at the problem. Because you absolutely 100% can get rid of poverty by throwing money at it. You always have done. You literally always have been able to get rid of poverty by throwing money at it. Governments just don't want to do it. Because they would have to admit that any society that has poverty would be their fault. If your society has poverty in it and you're the government, it's your fault. It's not the people who are in poverty's fault. We can't give the homeless free houses. Meanwhile, Finland and Austria solved homelessness by giving people free housing. Literally. Exactly. Like, sometimes Occam's razor is a reasonable assumption, right? Rather than prevaricating.
Occam's razor is always correct. Honestly, just look at it. Be back in a minute.
of what happens to the housing market if you decommodify like a big portion of it, and we just can't just give people free houses to solve homelessness. And I'm just like, well, it turns out actually, if you wanted to solve homelessness, you just built houses and you put the people in the houses. It's really not a difficult kind of heuristic to solve. The thing is, as well, is that the way in which we talk about this shit in Britain, we talk about it in the most fucking dumb way impossible. The way that we talk about poverty in this country, we talk about state policy, it's not about what creates the best society. It's not about using policy to maximize utility. All that British people care about when a policy is created is, under no circumstances does somebody allowed to get something that I perceive them not to have earned or not to deserve. This happens so often. Honestly, it makes my blood fucking boil. It makes my blood boil. This crab bucket shit. Like, I'm sorry. Make a utilitarian argument or fuck off. Make a utilitarian argument or fuck off. Like, don't come at me and say, well, this person got this thing that they didn't deserve. I'm like, is the country happier? Are the vital signs of the population better after implementing this policy or not? Give me an answer to this question. I couldn't give a shit about your moralistic nonsense.
All budget discussions are about the sort of society you want to create and the measures that you take to create. So I joined the Labour Party because the historic commitment of the Labour Party to tackle poverty, particularly to target those most vulnerable to poverty, elderly, children, disabled. I joined it because I want an economy where there's full employment and people had decent wages and they were guaranteed protections at work. And also they had a quality of life because we had decent public services, access to health, education and housing, basically. And that's the mission. And we talk about missions, that's the mission of the Labour Party. So in terms of one of the priorities has got to be tackling, for me at the moment, child poverty, because I see so much in my constituency. One simple measure was to scrap the 2-child limit. Predictions from all the different charities lifting 300,000 kids out of poverty. Resolution Foundation said 490,000. Just small measures like that, step by step, would assist.
And the thing is that the right-wingers who will respond to this by saying, well, we can't be seen to be encouraging people to have children they can't afford, despite we have a low birth rate, story for another time, is that, first of all, it didn't actually lead to a disfertility effect broadly. So it didn't actually teach people not to have children in the way that they kind of moralistically apply the ways in which we do policy. And second, care whether or not you think the poverty high or low. Because that's the utilitarian argument. It is, does poverty go down if you implement this policy? If yes, then do it. Because again, these people who support the 2-child benefit cap would rather children be in poverty so they feel better about how policy is being done than the fact that getting rid of it would make the country happier and better. And also healthier. We'd spend less on having to spend money on the NHS for all of these children who are sicker. They'd be more productive, so we'd have a richer society because they would have grown up with better, fuller bellies, with more food, with a better lifestyle. They'd be more productive members of society if they didn't live in poverty as children. But what's long-term policy? What's long-term statecraft utility in comparison to, well, these people got money I didn't think they really deserved, so I feel bad. Wah! I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Facts do not care about your feelings about how this policy works. The fact is that it brings down poverty. I don't give a shit about how you feel about whether or not these kids deserve to be fed or not. Fuck off.
That's I'm hoping now that in the budget that Rachel's going to come back with a proposal on that.
Do you think if she were to come back with a proposal to scrap or at least introduce more flexibility over time on the 2-child limit, that many people would say, well, in a sense, that is the quid pro quo for means testing the winter fuel allowance?
two things there is on the.
It was on the IFS thing, but it's insane how cost effective it is as a policy. Well, exactly. It's just like free school meals. Like, people get mad about free school meals. I'm like, oh, parents should feed their own children. I'm like, well, first of all, economies of scale make it a really efficient policy to be able to do. It means that you spend less administrative money in having places in which people have to be able to pay for their meals at school. If you have some people on free meals and some people not because you've means tested it, first of all, you pay money to administer the means test, and then second of all, you have to spend all of the money on all of the overheads to be able to have a payment system so that people who come from more affluent backgrounds then have to buy their meals. Now, if you subsidize it, the economies of scale make it cheaper per head, and also you also save all this money on administration. You tax the rich people more, makes it so much easier, so much simpler, more efficient, nobody falls through the cracks. Just an excellent example of why universalism works. And all of that money that you spend on giving kids free school meals so they eat better at school goes into higher test scores, it goes into better performing children. Better performing children and more educated children means a more productive workforce, means a richer economy, means a more prosperous economy further down the line as well. It literally pays for itself in terms of how you do your statecraft. But again, people think about economics like the people think about the economy like it's a household budget, and it just is not. And even then, even in a household budget model, you wouldn't starve yourself to save money, because if you starved yourself to save money, you wouldn't be able to then go to work properly to then re-earn the money to then feed yourself later. If you were trying to do that on a kitchen table budget, people would think you're fucking mad. Well, I am going to cut meals out of my diet to save for something else for a rainy day fund. That would be the dumbest thing you could possibly entertain in like a regular context within a household budget. So the fact that people try and do this when they're applying household budget economics to the macro economy, it's fucking demented. It's stupid. It's so silly. It's so silly.
The two-child limit, when that vote occurred on the King's speech, I was approached by the Chief Whip and said, look, we're doing this Poverty Commission. And I said, that's fantastic. And I'm happy with that. So just tell me this is going to be, the two-child limit is going to be addressed in that Poverty Commission, definitely. And secondly, tell me the timescale on it, and I'll be happy to vote for whatever. But they couldn't come up with that. So there's
they didn't say the commission.
Well, yeah, because they have Quangos and Inshallah. That's all they have. All they have is Quangos and Inshallah. It's like the disability cuts. They're going to spend more moderating at their level, get back from influencing the policy. Yep, 100%, exactly the same.
Commission would look at that.
They said they'll look at poverty overall. Inevitably, it must be one of these issues we'll consider. So, well, tell me it's a priority. Tell me when you're going to look at it, and tell me the timescale for the results of that. And I couldn't get that. And so that's why, because I opposed the two-child limit when it was introduced by the Tories. I did a speech, said I'd swim through vomit to vote against it, and I almost did because of the hypocrisy in the chamber at the time. So I said, I'm sorry, that's not a good enough assurance for me, and therefore I'm going to vote for the SNP amendment. And that's what lost me the whip, because this is such a priority. Now, I'm hoping...
How does it feel, just before we move on, how does it feel to be outside of the Parliamentary Labour Party for the first time in your parliamentary career?
It's a bit strange. The only sanction is that I can't attend the Parliamentary Labour Party meetings, which I wasn't a frequent attender of as well, I have to admit, but there you are. And I still abide by the whip. That's the requirement of it. And maybe I smile a bit more, but that's all. So, but I'm trying to...
Would you like to be back in?
Of course I would. I'm a Labour member. Of course I would. But I do the job just the same as I ever did. I've said to them, I'll always put my constituency first. And if the issues come up, I'll always vote in their interest first. And that's it. But on this one, I think maybe they will do something more rapidly now, because there has been real anxiety. On the winter fuel allowance means testing, I believe in universal benefits, because you get the benefit to everyone then. But also, it's so much more expensive doing a means tested benefit. It's 12 times more expensive to administer, and that's so much less efficient. However, when that came up, I said then, well, if you're going to do that and you're worried about rich people getting this benefit, why don't you just include it in the pension and tax them? Simple as that. Or at least come up with a tapering. Because
what's that? What's like John McDonnell's talking about taxing it back and tax tapers and universalism? It's almost like everything I've been saying on stream for the past 2 months was just correct. I am always correct. I am the oracle. Make me prime minister. I'll get it sorted in a fucking day.
Because in my constituency, I come in on the bus and I walk through town. I've been stopped in the street. I have a bit of banter on the bus, but people come up to me. I've had people come up to me I've got Heathrow in my constituency. A lot of people work Heathrow, got a reasonable pension, but a lot of the women in particular only did a limited number of years, small pension, tips them over the edge, so they can't claim pension credit. So they're losing out. They will be cold this winter. And I'm worried for their health, to be honest. So it was a mistake. And if they'd have come up with proposals on tapering or whatever, maybe we could have voted for it. Age UK, I met them yesterday.
Dan.
They're saying this is pushing 2 million pensioners into fuel poverty. That can't be right for a Labour government.
Yeah. Do you wish you were Chancellor then?
Of course I do, yeah. That's why I stood.
Well, the thing is, it's not a Labour government. That's the problem. It isn't a Labour government. It's the Starmer government. Like, I've changed my rhetoric on this, is that I don't call it the Labour government anymore. I call it the Starmer... I don't call it the Labour Party. I call it the Starmer Party. Like, it's not a Labour Party. Because in the words of Harold Wilson, the Labour Party is a moral crusade, or it is nothing. And at the moment, it's fucking nothing. At the moment, it's literally nothing. It's nothing to me. It's nothing to me. It's dead to me.
Shadow Chancellor. Yeah,
but are you literally sitting there now thinking you're getting this all wrong?
No. I'm trying to be as constructive as possible. As I said, I think this whole range of...
I mean, it's sad, isn't it? John just banging his head against the brick wall of the Starmer project, like trying to be conciliatory and trying to work across the divide. And these people would literally not piss on him if he was on fire. Honestly, John. Like, I love you, John. I really do. I think you're an excellent MP. I think you're a really brilliant advocate for left-wing politics, and you have been for your whole life. But it's getting pathetic and embarrassing now. It's getting embarrassing watching you continue to try and want to win people over who literally do not care if you lived or died, and who see you as somebody who they want to cleanse from political politics. Sorry, that's a tautology. That they want to cleanse you from the political scene. They don't want you there anymore, John. They make it obvious they don't want you there anymore. And you're treating them like they're rational actors that you can engage with in good faith. And they fucking despise you. Stop trying. Go and join Jeremy. Do something positive.
opportunities. This could be a big budget. But my worry is, why do you announce two measures which are effectively austerity measures when you're telling me you're going to end austerity? Because I tell you, my community can't take austerity anymore.
Can I just, this probably sounds a bit bonkers, but Steph and I both go out and talk to different groups of people quite a lot. And
Okay. Let's find out where our lovely comrade's from. Hayes and Harlington. Born and brought up in Liverpool. Great Yarmouth Grammar School. St Joseph's College in Ipswich. And oh, you went to a technical college. You went to a poly. Good for him. Okay. Okay. He represents Hayes and Harlington in West London. So there we go. He's in Harlington.
I do talk about child poverty and the scandal of child poverty, and indeed the scandal of a low-wage economy where you have what would traditionally be seen as full employment, but hundreds of thousands and some, actually more than that, people are in full-time work but depend on food banks.
And low pay, insecure.
So remember, I don't know if anybody was watching Novara Media on Thursday, where I talked about the idea that the Phillips curve had broken down. The Phillips curve was flat. So the Phillips curve is a economic observation that as unemployment goes down, wages will increase. That's the Phillips curve as a curve. But if it flattens out, we lose the relationship between unemployment and wages. And this happened throughout the austerity period, throughout the liquidity traps of the post-2008 economies in both the United States and in the UK, but more so in the UK. Because we had really low unemployment. They didn't have as low unemployment as we did. And wages never increased until we did expansionary policy. So... but we had this is the idea that, well, if you have a flat Phillips curve, you don't really have a structural deficit because you're not actually increasing the overall wages in the economy. So
and so it is for me one of the absolute scandals of any rich economy, forcing essentially people to live in that kind of poverty.
Well, it's not the scandal of this kind of... It's a scandal of...
neoliberalism.
It's the scandal of conservative politics, Robert. It's the scandal of conservatism and right-wing politics. Like, you say, well, it's just... Oh, some people have mismanaged the economy. No, they didn't mismanage the economy. This was by design. This is conservative politics. This is conservative politics. They don't want to solve poverty because they believe in pulling yourself up by your mythical bootstraps. That's what they believe in. They believe that it's not their job to lift other people out.
I can barely bend. There ain't no way I'm going to be able to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Because even if I tried that, I'm pretty sure my knees will buckle and my ankles would be swearing at me like bastards. This whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps and this Protestant work ethic, dear God. I can't be doing with this noise, I really can't. This country is screaming out for funding, screaming out for capital investment. We just won't do that, I don't think. I'm hoping to be proven wrong, though. But I seriously don't trust her. I don't think she'll do that. So her and Liz Kendall, the head of the Department of Work and Pensions, our benefits agency, terrified, utterly terrified. Ugh.
Of poverty. It's as simple as that. They believe that if you're in poverty, that's your fault.
No, it isn't.
Thank you, Shami, for another £2. You call it the Neo-Labour Party. It's bad. That's a good name as well.
Literally a communist.
Thank you for the follow, Jetplane. Also, remember, if you're enjoying the content, you can subscribe on Twitch for $4.99 or for free with Twitch Prime by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. It gets you a free subscription every single month, courtesy of Jeff Bezos, at no additional cost to yourself. All the benefits of a Twitch sub, like ad-free viewing and my animated and static emotes in Twitch chats, at no additional cost, and gives me money from Jeff Bezos. So it's well worth doing if you've got a Prime sub. You can also drop bits on Twitch. It gets you text-to-speech for 100 bits or more. If you want a message read out over on YouTube, you can super chat as Shami has just done. And I always read out super chats on stream of any value as long as they are not rude. And on YouTube, you can become a member for 99p. That gives you access to my archive live streams, my static emotes in YouTube chat, and in the YouTube comment section, as Limey Redneck always likes to show. And I do thank you, Limey Redneck, for using my emotes in the YouTube comment section. And of course, if the best way to support the stream is to gift memberships to your fellow viewers. So if you want to support the stream, you want to give me some money, but you don't have a message to read out, you're best off taking that money and spend it gifting memberships to spread the love around, boost stream the algorithm, and give more people access to the members-only archive live streams.
Listen to Helena. She is amazing, and she is well worth the 99 pence.
Do I have a formal economics education? No, I do not have a formal economics education. I have just not got a real job. So I get to spend all day reading papers and
Fucking
theories and
neoliberalism.
watching videos about economics to learn to learn about economics. No, I do not have any formal education in economics. I've just got what I've managed to glean from my time being a professional content creator. Professional. This is an area of my knowledge I didn't really, I was not up to date with, so I wanted to learn it. Thank you for the 5 gifted, Ron. I appreciate you.
It's funny seeing Steph again. I was wondering where she went to.
One of the things that I'm always struck by is when I talk.
I mean, people have formal economics educations a lot of the time just end up being neoliberals anyway, because that's what you get in economic groupthink. Well, that's breaking
about these
down
things, you sort of get a sense of people in the audience just switching off, and there is just something really odd. And I see this on a much bigger canvas. The way that people react to the even worse things that we see in places like Gaza. It's very hard, it seems to me, in politics or indeed in public life to get people at the moment to empathize with how other people's lives are so awful. How does one connect with people so that they say, well, this really is a priority to sort?
I don't say as much as that in my community.
Right.
When we have a problem, people queue up to help. I've been amazed at the altruism that there is out there, and I'm not being pious about this. I'm just saying that's not what I see, and I know where you're coming from. Sometimes things get to the point where people say, "I can't cope with that. I've got enough on my own plate," and switch off. But actually, I'm seeing less and less of that. I'm actually seeing people come forward.
Just on the food bank point, because I was with the lady who runs the food bank near me, and she was telling me on Friday that the demand for the food bank now is up 60%, and donations are down 85%.
Tough, isn't it, out there for people? The figure yesterday, Trussell Trust. When Labour was in power, the Trussell Trust gave out about 60,000 food parcels a year. Right? They now give out 3 million. That's how bad it's got. And the flow into food banks is drying up because people it's not that they don't want to give, they haven't got it to give. And that's how bad it's got. It's 14 years of austerity. And I say to people, that's what do you expect? There's been 14 years of grinding austerity, low wages, people who are on benefits have been stigmatized as well.
Yeah.
So if one has Amazon Prime subscription, one can get a free subscription to my Twitch account, and Bezos pays me. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. So if you pay money for Amazon Prime, you can link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then you get a free subscription every single month. Yeah, JimSpeak, just pop the link in chat. It takes like 5 seconds to set up a Twitch account.
We've had all of that. Now's the turn to turn all that round.
And is it going to get better?
I think it will, but it's going to ensure that Labour governments keep.
John, I admire your thoughtfulness about this, but I don't think it's going to get better for a long time. I really don't. I deeply mistrust your former party. I really do. Between Reeves, Streeting and Kendall, I'm panicked. I really am quite worried about what the three of them are going to do. Starmer's just a mouthpiece, essentially, for Pat McFadden and Morgan McSweeney. Ugh. Don't trust Reeves. I don't. And Wes Streeting is a slimy little bastard.
On track.
You should join Twitch from the website to do a paid subscription. So if you pay for your sub every month with money, you should do that through the website, because the app stores for YouTube and for Twitch, whether you're Android or Apple, they take a surcharge for in-app subscriptions, which makes it like £6 rather than £5. So you shouldn't subscribe.
I will mention that now. If you're a mobile user and you sub through your mobile, for Google, for me, through the app on my phone, it is $6.49 a month now instead of $4.99. It used to be $4.49. Now it's $6.49. So that £2 is going straight into the pockets of Google. They don't need my money, but they are money-grabbing bastards, and they said to them, you have to put on a surcharge for us for doing it through mobile. Bleh. So please listen. if you can do it sub through your desktop, and you'll drop back down. It still went up, but it's only $5.49, not the $6.49 that I pay through my phone.
Through money, through the app. But you should be able to subscribe through Amazon Prime on both, but probably more likely to want to do so from PC or use your browser on your phone.
Going to require pressure from the grassroots, both in the party, the trade union movement, and our communities overall. And we have to be honest with people as well. We have to be say that, like the vote.
Not getting rid of the two-child cap is reprehensible, and economically speaking, the winter fuel allowance, doing that, cutting that for 10 million pensioners, daft. Winter fuel allowance is 1% of the benefits budget, 1%. Economically, it's insignificant. It's like just under £2 billion a year. So cutting it to save probably not even $1 billion is daft. She shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have done it.
Free school meals is something we should be doing, because again, you sound really passionate about the kids, and obviously the breakfast in schools is a great initiative.
Universal free school.
Yes, yeah. Because Sadiq Khan is introducing it in London. We're going in. To be honest, it's one of the most beneficial things that kids can have. You know you're going to get a decent meal. You know you're not going to be falling asleep in class because you're hungry, and that you'll get a better education as a result.
Everything you want to do sounds very expensive, though.
No, not at all. We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. 6 large.
Fuck off. No. And even if it is expensive, we should be doing it anyway, because all these policies are morally reprehensible. Starving kids. Seriously. Truly sickening. All these measures that John wants to do, especially for child poverty and getting good attainment, being a weekend class, is economically sound. So cutting it just is stupid. Shouldn't be doing it. Should be getting funded. And well done, Sadiq Khan. A Labour politician, by the way, Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London.
Largest economy, the wealth is there. Why? Because workers create it. So let's make sure it's properly distributed.
There is one other thing, though, slightly off piece that I wanted to ask you about.
And also, it's like literally not even expensive. It's like literally not expensive to do free school meals. It's not expensive to do free school meals. It's not expensive to have a universal winter fuel payment. It's not expensive to cut the two-child benefit cap. All of those policies together cost less than almost half, in fact, overall, the value that you would gain by equalising capital gains tax with income tax. Equalise them, you could pay for all of those policies and more.
We've got what I think is probably one of possibly the most important political event of our lifetimes coming up, the American presidential election. Yeah. If Donald Trump wins, and I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to win. How do you think?
Shut up, Preston. That crook isn't going to win, hopefully. Shouldn't jinx it. Shana, darling, welcome. I am hydrating. I'm being naughty. It is cider. It is delicious. Welcome in, darling. Good to see you. We are watching John McDonnell. He was the Shadow Chancellor for Jeremy Corbyn, and he's getting interviewed by Robert Peston on a podcast called And All the Rest is Money. Shall we continue?
A British Labour Prime Minister, what kind of relationship do you think a British Labour Prime Minister should have with President Trump?
Trump election scares me stiff, to be honest. It really does, both in terms of the implications for our country and the globe overall. But an election takes place. If he wins, you have to deal with.
It's funny you turning up when they're just about to talk about him possibly getting voted in instead of Harris. Peston, yes, a shady fuck. Yeah, don't trust him. He was a BBC economics editor. He does. Not entirely sure who actually pays for this podcast. Who it is? It's probably Global. Come to think of it, because Steph's there. So yeah. Did you have fun? John McDonnell isn't a shady fuck. He was Corbyn's shadow chancellor, so he's decent. Really quite decent. Good man. He's from Liverpool. So he's a good bean. Let's continue. Whoops.
Them like you do anybody else, but you have to count your fingers after every time you shake his hand.
Angela Merkel, when she was chancellor, was very clearly, she very clearly distanced herself from Trump. She was pretty unusual as a world leader in the way that she distanced herself from Trump. Do you think a British Prime Minister could or should?
Because she'd found out that he'd been spying on the German government. Why do you think she didn't want to go near the bastard? With any luck, he won't win. But then that really scares me and all. Ugh. But hopefully it'll be good. Don't get me wrong, not a big fan of Harris either. But she'll be 1,000 times better than that veiled fucking fascist, essentially.
Follow her example?
Yeah, but you have to have a business-like relationship. Of course you do. But at the same time, you have to challenge things when you think it's the wrong decisions being made, and you have to be honest. And your job is to represent the British people.
Even if the challenge then leads to negative implications for trade.
I think you have to look after the interests of the British people, and you have to do that from a principled position as well. Trump is threatening all sorts of tariffs at the moment. We'll see if that works out in reality. But if we have to have a fight on issues like that,
will cost around $7.5 billion. Yeah, and it's about $15 billion for the capital gains tax rise, if I remember correctly.
Well, we have to make sure that we're working with our European partners to have that fight.
Scary, this talking of
Trump. It is.
We just live in a time of really big change.
Well, and populist threat across. My big fear is that's what I keep saying, and I dropped Caroline ages ago about this. My big fear is always if we don't succeed as a Labour government, disillusionment sets in. And the beneficiaries of that will be the far right, as we've seen in Italy, France, and Germany.
And just on that, and you can decide, or you can tell us whether you regard reform as the far right. But if you were Keir Starmer and you were thinking about the threat 4 or 5 years' time, would you be seeing the threat as from the Tory party or from reform?
The threat's already there. Have you seen our council by-election results this last few weeks? We're dropping on average about 19 points. In Worthing, 29 points we dropped.
So this is the Labour share of the vote dropping really dramatically.
And we just lost a by-election council in Blackpool to Reform. So Reform is a real threat. And I actually think the Tory party need to wake up to that as well, because Reform could shift the whole tenure of our politics to places.
Matt in chat's asking if Donald Trump becomes president, and becomes a dictator after Project 2025, do you think Keir and Labour will be licking his boots?
Neoliberalism.
Thank you for that.
Bloody welcome.
I think they would do that, and this is why one of the biggest reasons I think that even as a leftist, I think it's good to support remaining in the European Union, is that we want to have things that are beneficial for our country, diplomatically as well as economically, with people powerful on our doorstep, that aren't just vassal states of the United States. The soft power is what is important. And what Brexit has created geopolitically is it has made the United Kingdom into a vassal state of the US. To the point at which we're saying, well, we can't stand up to Donald Trump as president because that might impact our trade deals. Yeah, and that's important because we're not trading with the European Union as much anymore. Regardless of all of my critiques of the European Union as a neoliberal trade bloc, it has its benefits. And certainly those economic benefits are greater than those in economic relationships with America. And geopolitically, the EU represents a far more kind of disparate geopolitical ideology than the very kind of unified one that you get in America, which is of course imperialistic, very imperialistic. So the worst thing that you get from Brexit is it has given a lot of power to the Atlanticists, to the people who love the special relationship, to dictate how in which we do our statecraft, and that's bad.
Go away.
A little mentioned implication of a Trump win would be the end of negotiations on all the global minimum tax stuff. Exactly. You all know Keith loves that special relationship, not only because he is Sir Tricom, of course. He was in the Trilateral Commission, but also a bunch of people who are close to the Starmer Politburo are members of the Britain America Project. Like, even Peter Jukes, a lib extraordinaire from Byline Times, who previously was a member of the Britain America Project, has criticised the people who are within that for being too Atlanticist. That's how you know Atlanticism in this country is just fucking is off the chain, really, especially in a post-Brexit world. When Peter Jukes thinks your Atlanticism has gone too far, then maybe it's time to have a look and see what you've done wrong.
Yeah. That Tricom really scares me,
None of us want to go.
It's scary. Do you have anything happy to end on?
Yeah, I do actually.
Go on.
I do. And it is that thing out there, actually, that people are involved in the debate. They want a Labour government to succeed, and they're willing to pitch in with their ideas. So there's a momentum out there. It might not be visible to some of the Labour leadership at the moment, but there are people campaigning out there on all sorts of issues. Maybe not in traditional forms, but, people are taking action on everything that you can see. You see it about Gaza and other issues like that, of course you do. But there's so many other issues that people are campaigning on because they're not willing to put up with it anymore.
Yeah. So I've got to ask you the big political question of the moment before we go. Who gave you your suit?
me, Timon, me. That's the other thing that really upset people in my constituency. Just at the time during the winter fuel allowance thing, all the stuff comes out about the freebies, the glasses, the suits, and all the rest of it. And I just keep, that's that phrase. Who used it? There's no such thing as a free lunch. There really isn't. My worry now is the next big scandal is around lobbying and lobbyists and people tracking those dinners, gifts to policy changes. And I'm saying to my colleagues that you have to be really careful on this because you could.
But the thing is that all this information is public knowledge. All this information is out there. I've been covering it day after day after day, whether it's people being appointed to HMRC who started consultancies who donated £100,000 to the Labour Party, or people with links to Cayman.
Shara, HMRC is His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So it's basically our IRS, essentially. It's our tax man. So these people getting appointed to the HMRC, they are more than likely going to be gamekeepers turned poachers, essentially. So these people go in and they discuss with HMRC to make the tax burden on the upper echelons easier, less of a burden, essentially, so they can keep up most of their ill-gotten gains. Most of it, actually, come to think of it. So just remember that. Gamekeepers turned poachers, essentially going in, advising HMRC about what policy decisions and how to accrue tax. Yeah, glad to be of service. Your lobbying's worse, obviously. Absolutely diabolical over there, you poor bastards. Leave the HMRC alone, you lobbying fucks. Really don't like it at all. Ugh.
Islands-based hedge funds who had climate advisory board people who then get made climate envoys by the government after donating £4 million to the Labour Party, or whether it's somebody who advised Rachel Reeves on green finance investment that she had a conversation with at Davos, being appointed
I'm literally a communist.
to their green investment board, along with her previous employer Barclays Bank, out of nowhere. All these different people who have connections to lobbyists or members of the Starmer Politburo who've given money or advice or given their time to the party or whatever it is, being rewarded with important positions in terms of statecraft. This is happening. It's been happening ever since they got into government, and it's been happening. And the media don't even cover it. Carla Denyer had to take Anushka Astana on Peston's show and say, look, well, actually, I don't care about the Taylor Swift tickets. Why are we not talking about the Quadrature donation? Why are we not talking about the climate envoy, Rachel Kite, who came from this Cayman Islands-based hedge fund? Why are we not talking about this? We're talking about some fucking football tickets. Like, this information is public domain. I don't think this lobbying stuff is going to become a scandal because everybody knows it. We've all been talking about it already, and the media are completely ignoring it. Completely ignoring it. And diverting it onto, well, Taylor Swift got some VIP coverage. I'm like, that's not as important as the person who donated £100,000 to the Labour Party and who runs a public consultancy. There's a conflict of interest being appointed to an advisory position at HMRC. That is real lobbyism and corruption. Out there, public knowledge, reported in the Times, not even touching public consciousness because it's not reaching broadcast media.
Should be reaching broadcast media. God damn it, Leveson 2 should have went ahead.
Could really disillusion people.
Yeah, an important message.
Important point. We'll have you back on to talk about that and other things as they unfold. But John McDonnell, excellent to see
thank you. Thanks very much. And that's it.
I do love me some John McDonnell. He was really good there.
Well done, John. That was amazing. Am I coming through loud and clear, Shanna? Oh,
I imagine
what
if he'd been
time?
Chancellor, how based that would have been.
Oh yeah, would have been amazing. What time does Raptor start? If I've got it right, he starts in an hour and a half. So that'd be 8 AM, my time.
Melon cat. What happened to using fewer consultants? I know, right? It's almost like they just read the blurb of Rosie Collington and Mariana Mazzucato's The Big Con. Said, all right, not as many consultants. Then just decided we'll have our consultants. They donated to us so much anyway, so.
Bleh.
No worries, Ben.
Ah, sweet. I'm going to try and stay for all of it so I can annoy Raptor. Ha ha ha. I've put one of my favourite DBZ
As far as I can see, the
extended
BBC haven't
episodes.
reported the 4 million donations to the Telegraph as far as super mainstream media outlets from a quick search. I know it's ridiculous. It's pathetic. Like, and Zach Polanski, like, he can tweet about it as much as he wants, but he's just a random Green Party deputy leader. He's not going to cut through, is he?
Well, we're just going to have to give him a bigger platform then, aren't we, Helena? Really should start streaming more green stuff so we can hear Ellie Chowns, Carla Denyer, more of Zach Polanski. Get their message out there. So when the next general election comes around, they get more seats. Be brilliant.
It's literally what I was just about to get on to now, Solly.
Remember, be wary of burnout. I'm unusual. I can stay awake for days at a time. Agony's a great motivator, staying awake. Mind you, I'll probably dip out at some point and have a quick power nap. Okay, here we go. Piano spat.
How hard is it
This
to
one
believe
should
that
be quite
Shenrik
fun.
is going to be our next Prime Minister? I don't think he is. I actually think the next Prime Minister will be James Cleverly. It'll be James Cleverly or Wes Streeting. Or, I mean, actually, I have my money on Bridget Phillipson as the protege future leader for the Labour Party.
God, would she be better than Wes Streeting? Not entirely sure. Oh. You never know, it might be Rachel Reeves. The one that scares me the most becoming Prime Minister would probably be Wes Streeting. I didn't see it being Liz Kendall. I'm usually awake most of the night, and I usually have a nap, just as you're getting up, actually. I call it a nap. It's really just to get myself reboosted, forget about my pain for a couple hours.
Yeah, the quiet's nice, isn't it? Let's give you a bit of quiet. Would be funny if Miliband returned. Imagine. Just try essentially, yeah, still trying to rehash old beef from the night from 2015. Yeah, just make Ashworth PM. Just wait until the first by-election and allow Ashworth to stand. Just parachute him in.
Is that how long your shift is? Wow. What does my mum do? My mum done a mix of shifts. She was a shift worker when she was a midwife. So she got her off duty for the next month, a month in advance, essentially, so she could actually live her life and look after us while we were growing up. But towards the end of her career, she'd done a lot more family planning clinic, which is basically, what was it, 8-5 or something. She worked in a family planning clinic with a specialty with teenagers, young mums, stuff like that. Only 4 days a week. Wow, 4-day week. I wish we would adopt that over here. Follow the Nordics. Should be following the Nordics on a lot of things, especially about prisons, rehabilitative care, stuff like that. Well, that's good.
Try and get the socks actually in the frame here.
Oh, look, Kim Ledbetter's wearing yellow socks for mental health awareness.
So Kim Ledbetter is the MP for Spen Valley for the Labour Party. And she tweeted out this.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Employee owned. Yay. Oh, that cheers me up so much, darling. Oh, fucking amazing. Worker co-op. Bring it on.
This statement on October the 10th saying, proud to wear my yellow socks in Parliament today for hashtag World Mental Health Day. And I'm like, okay, you're raising awareness for mental health problems. I think that's fine. That's reasonable. That's reasonable. Okay. What happened to your mental health cabinet member? What happened to your Secretary of State for Mental Health? That disappeared quickly, didn't it? Because they got rid of that position from their front bench. And people have been rightly taking the piss out of this.
Fucking neoliberalism.
Woohoo 11 months, comrades. Raised fist.
Yay!
People have been rightfully taking the piss out of this because, okay, you've put the yellow socks on. We're all very aware of mental health. Okay. But what's the policy? What are you doing to help people who have mental health problems? What's your policy prescription with your giant majority? Sure, you've gestured, you've done your gesture politics, which again, Keir Starmer says he doesn't like. But what's...
Oh, that's brilliant. Actually being able to love your job is good. It's good for your mental health as well. Is there anyone that's actually allergic, or do people who are allergic to like dander, fur, stuff like that, do they not work there? I feel for the people who want to become veterinary nurses or vets or shelter care workers, stuff like that, or your position as well. Because if they love animals and they want to help, but they're allergic and they keep on sneezing and coughing. Oh, antihistamines, Benadryl, stuff like that. Tell them I feel for them. I'm not allergic to pets. I'm quite lucky. I did have a cat, but I'm more a dog person, especially big dogs, like golden retrievers or Labradors or German Shepherds, stuff like that. Do they? Oh, dear God. I know how that feels. I was, at one point in my life, I was on 16 pills a day. It was rough. Ugh. I'm not on 16 pills anymore. Thank fuck for that. Come on. 5. I'm on 5 pills. And I've got my patch, my fentanyl patch for my pain, which is good. Oh. If I ever win the lottery, I'm going straight over to annoy Raptor so I can meet Achilles. Because Achilles looks like my kind of crazy dog. Obviously, I'd love to meet Raptor's cat as well. That'd be fun. Cats are very individualistic. But dogs are amazing. Would you? Have you met him? It's good being able to see him. Okay, here we go.
What's your policy to help the mentally ill? Turns out, chat, their policy to help the mentally ill, first of all, they've got two policies to help the mentally ill. The first one is apparently to cut a bunch of their benefits. The first plan for those who have mental health problems is to cut their benefits.
Oh Christ, it's from the Tory graph. We've got a paper over here in the UK called the Evening Telegraph or the Daily Telegraph. They're an extreme right-wing nutcase of a rag. It used to be the Daily Mail, but they've kind of went by the wayside. They're still right-wing nutters, obviously, but the Tory graph, as we call it jokingly, they're just mad now. They're completely mental. Sickness handouts to be cut for mentally ill under New Labour proposal. Yeah, just what we need. Yeah.
Because new boss, same as the old boss, I guess. Just the same policy. I mean, this was the one actually proposed by the Conservative Party. It came out of Ian Duncan Smith's very kind of ironically named Centre for Social Justice, another opaquely funded think tank that churns out bile to create the worst policy you've ever seen. And so, of course, you know what people with mental health problems really need is they need a government to take money away from them that helps them deal with their mental health problems. I'm sure that will definitely make their mental health far better, force them to go back into work that they may not even be in the position to be able to do because that's what mental health problems are like. And even then, you know, I don't think it's going to make people's mental health better having to go and stack shelves for Tesco, but regardless, either way, One of their policies is to cut benefits to people who have mental health problems, which apparently will save £3 billion. And it was Tory plans that were drawn up but who weren't passed. And of course, the ghoul herself, Liz Kendall, is behind this potential plan.
Dear God.
People with mental health conditions could lose some of their benefits under plans being considered by ministers to cut welfare spending. Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, is weighing up whether to press ahead with the restrictions on sickness handouts that would save £3 billion. Under the proposals, welfare rules would be tightened to require an extra 400,000 people who are signed off long-term to prepare for a return to work. They would automatically lose some of their benefits payments, and it is hoped they would eventually enter the workforce, cutting the welfare bill even further. And this is essentially exactly what the Conservative government under George Osborne were doing from 2010 to 2016, which is, if we cut their benefits, they'll be forced into work. No plan to make them fit to be back in work. Of course, that was the year of ATOS miracles, where people who were clearly not fit to work were judged fit to work anyway. No plan to make these people better.
Yeah, people like me.
Funding massively into NHS provision of mental health treatment, or I don't know, fixing the material condition that leads to mental health problems in the first place. No, just cut the benefits, force them back into work that they're clearly not in a position to be able to do, as they have been judged as such by medical professionals to be signed off for work. The Ian Duncan Smith policies of yore being brought back, this time with a red coat of paint and the administration of Liz Kendall at the Work and Pensions Department. Rachel Reeves is looking at making savings on Britain's annual £44 billion sickness benefits bill as she looks to balance the books at her first budget this month. The Chancellor is struggling to raise enough cash after warnings that raids on non-DOMs, private schools and investors would bring in far less than hoped.
Raise capital gains. Please. That's how you plug that black hole. Or borrow to invest. Like Boris did, oddly enough. But you've never mentioned that, because all got spaffed up against the wall. He borrowed billions, hundreds of billions, mostly for the pandemic, obviously, but for other stuff. Then Liz Truss comes along, absolutely destroys the property market, raises mortgage prices. Between her and Kwasi Kwarteng, this country got fucking screwed. And they're just carrying on with their economic policies. Labour, you are bastards.
Or you could cut, I don't know, something that isn't relevant and doesn't drop poverty rates, like, I don't know, cutting Trident or something. You know, plenty of things that you could cut if you really wanted to cut rather than increasing taxes. Or you could, you know, look at capital gains taxes or wealth taxes. But these have all been things that have not been committed to as of, I don't know, private equity bosses who have loads of political power. So they're very easy for them to be able to pressure the government into U-turning on a potential tax proposal that might affect them, especially when people who've spent lots of time working in the private equity industry, like Lord Clive Hollick, used to be on the board at KKR, a large American private investment firm. They might be able to go, no, we give all this money in donations. Maybe don't tax us to pay for your problems.
Back in a minute.
So yeah, when you're in hock with the private equity industry, difficult to ask them to pay more tax. Very easy, though, to pick on people with mental health problems who have literally no recourse and are at the mercy of the state.